The headline was everywhere. Teen beats supercomputer in global coding contest. Is it even possible? Jamie Walker's name was trending. On every social media platform, millions of people were debating the same shocking question. How could a teenager, a high schooler from nowhere, beat the most advanced AI in the world? The contest had been billed as the ultimate showdown, humans versus machine, and the stakes were high. The supercomputer, Orion, was designed by some of the brightest minds at a tech company that Elon Musk himself had invested in. Orion could process more lines of code in a second than any human coder could in a year. No one had ever believed it was possible for a human to defeat Orion, until Jamie Walker did. At just 16 years old, Jamie wasn't even a household name. His online persona, CodeKid16, was known only to a niche group of tech enthusiasts who followed coding forums and underground programming competitions. But after the contest, his life would never be the same. In the final round of a global coding contest hosted by one of the world's most prestigious tech companies, Jamie had managed to break the unbreakable algorithm. He found a flaw in Orion's code, a flaw that no one, not even the designers of Orion, had spotted. It wasn't just a win. It was a game changer. Within hours, Jamie's victory had gone viral. News outlets from around the world were scrambling to interview him. Social media was ablaze with wild theories, memes, and discussions. The name Jamie Walker was on everyone's lips. But among all the excitement, one name stood out above the rest: Elon Musk. Elon Musk, the billionaire entrepreneur known for revolutionizing everything from electric cars to space travel, didn't believe it. Not for a second. On his Twitter, Musk posted a simple but pointed tweet: impossible. A human should not be able to outsmart a machine like Orion. A rematch is in order. The world exploded with reactions. Some cheered Jamie on, others questioned his methods. Was it really possible for a teenager to defeat one of the most powerful AI systems ever created? Could Jamie's victory be a fluke, or was he truly the prodigy the world had never seen? But the tweet from Musk changed everything. A rematch wasn't just a suggestion. It was an invitation. An invitation to prove that Jamie wasn't some lucky kid who had beaten a machine in a one-off. It was a challenge to reaffirm that humans could be more than just passengers on the AI-driven train of the future. Jamie didn't even have to make a public statement. The world had already formed its own opinion. He was a genius. He was a prodigy. But Elon Musk's challenge loomed over him like a storm cloud. As reporters swarmed him, Jamie barely had time to process what had just happened. Just days ago, he was a regular teenager, working part-time at a local electronics store and spending most of his time coding on his old laptop. Now, he was a household name, caught in a whirlwind of media, tech moguls, and public expectations. Jamie, what's your response to Elon Musk's challenge? One reporter asked as Jamie stepped out of his house, flanked by a sea of flashing cameras. Jamie's heart pounded in his chest. He hadn't been prepared for this kind of attention. He wasn't even sure he was ready for a rematch. What if he failed? What if the first victory had been a fluke? But there was no turning back. "I'm ready," Jamie said, his voice shaky but determined. "Let's do this." The crowd erupted into cheers, but Jamie could barely hear them over the rush of adrenaline flooding his ears. That night, after the media frenzy died down, Jamie sat in his room alone. His phone buzzed constantly: texts, DMs, notifications from every social platform imaginable. But all he could think about was the challenge from Elon Musk. It wasn't just a rematch. It was a statement. Jamie wasn't a kid playing in his basement anymore. He was about to take on the world's most powerful machine again. But there was something else on Jamie's mind, something deeper than just the coding competition. He thought about his mom, Linda, a single mother who had worked tirelessly to provide for him. Without her sacrifices, he wouldn't have had the resources to pursue his coding dreams. Would this challenge, this newfound fame, change their lives forever? Jamie took a deep breath, staring at the blinking cursor on his screen. He didn't need the money, the fame, or the recognition. He didn't even care about beating Orion again. But there was one thing he couldn't ignore. This was his chance to prove something to himself, to his mom, and to the world. He wasn't just CodeKid16 anymore. He was Jamie Walker, the kid who took down a supercomputer. And now, he had to face the man who had made it all happen, Elon Musk? What would you do if you were in Jamie's shoes? Would you take on Elon Musk's challenge? Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Before Jamie Walker became an overnight sensation, before his name was known by tech enthusiasts and media outlets around the world, he was just another teenager trying to make sense of the world. Growing up in a small, tight-knit town in Southern California, Jamie's life was anything but glamorous. His family didn't have the luxury of expensive gadgets or top-tier schools. His mother, Linda, worked long hours as a high school teacher, juggling multiple jobs to keep food on the table. Jamie never asked for much. He was just happy with the few things he had. But there was one thing that set him apart from everyone else in his town: his obsession with computers. It wasn't always clear to anyone around him that Jamie would become a tech prodigy. In fact, for the first few years of his life, he showed little interest in the typical childhood hobbies. While other kids were playing sports or riding bikes, Jamie spent his time tinkering with old electronics his mom brought home from garage sales. His first love wasn't basketball or even video games, but the art of breaking things down and figuring out how to fix them. "I used to sneak into the trash and pull out old circuit boards and discarded keyboards," Jamie once told a reporter during an interview. "I'd sit for hours just looking at the parts, trying to understand how it all worked." Linda never really understood what Jamie was doing, but she saw his passion, and that was enough for her to support it, however unconventional it might seem. She couldn't afford a brand new laptop for him, so she found an old, slow desktop computer at a yard sale. It was a piece of junk by today's standards, outdated, slow, and full of viruses. But to Jamie, it was a treasure chest waiting to be unlocked. At first, he just played games on it, simple ones. But the more he explored, the more he realized he could make games instead of just playing them. He started teaching himself how to code using tutorials he found online, and by the time he was 12, he was already working on basic programs. His friends at school would ask him to help fix their computers or tweak their video game mods. They had no idea how much effort Jamie was putting in to learn it all on his own. His mom, though, noticed the changes. "Jamie, are you sure you want to spend all your time on this?" Linda had asked him once when he was sitting in front of his computer for hours at a time, barely moving except to type. "I don't want to do anything else, Mom," Jamie had answered with quiet conviction. "This is what I'm good at." Linda didn't know much about computers, but she knew her son was different. And as long as he was happy and working hard, that was enough. By the time Jamie was 14, he had become a local legend. Not because he was a sports star or a social butterfly. No, Jamie was that quiet kid who sat in the back of the class, always absorbed in his thoughts. He never craved attention, never sought the spotlight. But if you needed someone to troubleshoot your computer, Jamie was the one you called. In high school, Jamie's talent became undeniable. He wasn't just fixing broken laptops anymore. He was creating complex coding programs from scratch. He had developed his first app at age 15, a simple game that earned him enough money to buy his first real laptop. But the more he learned, the more he realized how much he didn't know. And that was what drove him forward. His constant desire to improve, to push the limits of what was possible. That's when he stumbled upon something that would change his life forever: competitive coding. Jamie had heard about coding contests from a few of the kids at school, and he was intrigued. Most of them were too intimidated by the complexity of the challenges, but Jamie saw it as an opportunity to put his skills to the test. He entered his first contest just before his 16th birthday. It was a small, online event, but the competition was fierce. His fingers flew across the keyboard as he solved algorithmic puzzles faster than anyone else. His second contest was even bigger, with contestants from across the world. Jamie had to stay up late into the night to finish, relying on his caffeine-fueled focus to push through the difficult problems. The more he participated, the more addicted he became to the challenge. It wasn't just about winning. It was about solving problems, pushing the boundaries of what technology could do. That's when he heard about the biggest coding contest in the world, a challenge hosted by a top-tier tech company. The grand prize was something every coder dreamed of: a contract with the company, a seat at the table with some of the brightest minds in tech, and a chance to make a mark on the future of artificial intelligence. But it wasn't the prize that drew Jamie in. It was the competition itself. The supercomputer, Orion, was the centerpiece of the contest. Built to adapt and evolve, Orion was designed to solve algorithms that no human could ever dream of cracking. No one, not even the top engineers who created Orion, had ever thought a human could defeat it. But Jamie didn't see it that way. He believed that the key to beating Orion wasn't raw computing power. It was creativity. It was the ability to think outside the box, to approach problems in ways that machines simply couldn't. And that was exactly what Jamie did. The day of the contest was the most nerve-wracking of Jamie's life. Sitting in front of a computer in a small, crowded room filled with other competitors, Jamie knew that what he was about to do would either make or break his future. The pressure was unlike anything he had ever felt before, but something deep inside him told him that he could do it. He could crack the code. And when the final buzzer rang, it was Jamie Walker, this quiet, unassuming teen from a small town, who had outperformed everyone, including the most advanced machine ever created. But Jamie never expected the aftermath of that victory. He hadn't signed up for fame or recognition. He just wanted to test his skills and see where they could take him. What he didn't know was that his win would put him on a collision course with the most influential man in the tech world, Elon Musk. The news spread like wildfire. It wasn't just that Jamie Walker had won the global coding contest. It was that he had done the unthinkable. The kid from nowhere had beaten Orion, the most advanced AI in existence. For months, the world had watched in awe as Orion, a machine designed to adapt, learn, and solve problems faster than any human, was considered unbeatable. Until Jamie walked into the contest and shattered that belief in a matter of hours. The contest had been the culmination of weeks of preparation, where hundreds of coders from around the world participated, all vying for the ultimate prize, a job with one of the most prestigious tech companies in the world. The competition was fierce. Most of the participants were seasoned professionals, experts in algorithmic design, machine learning, and AI programming. Then, there was Jamie. He wasn't like the others. He didn't come from a family of tech moguls, and he hadn't attended an elite university. He wasn't even particularly well known in the programming world. But what he lacked in credentials, he made up for in raw talent. Jamie didn't just follow the rules. He bent them, rewrote them, and found ways to work around them. The challenge was simple on paper. The contestants had to solve a series of increasingly complex algorithms designed to test everything from machine learning to data encryption. While Orion quickly completed the initial rounds, Jamie's strategy was different. While others relied on brute force calculations and pre-built libraries of code, Jamie took a more creative approach. He identified flaws in Orion's programming. A small oversight in the way Orion parsed data, something the creators had overlooked, gave Jamie the edge he needed. It wasn't a fluke. It wasn't luck. It was Jamie's ability to think in ways the machine couldn't, to find a gap in its seemingly infallible design. As the final countdown ticked away, it became clear. Jamie had won. The results were announced live, and Jamie's name was called as the victor. The crowd, both virtual and in person, erupted into applause. Orion, despite its impressive processing power, had been bested by a human, something no one thought was possible. But that wasn't the end. In fact, it was just the beginning. The media coverage that followed was nothing short of chaotic. News outlets from every corner of the globe wanted a piece of Jamie Walker. He was no longer just a teenager in his room coding away. He was a global phenomenon. Tech blogs, magazines, and online forums were flooded with discussions. Was Jamie truly a genius? Was his victory the result of sheer brilliance? Or was it a lucky glitch in the system? But amidst the celebrations came a wave of skepticism. Elon Musk, a man who had built his empire on pushing the boundaries of technology, was one of the first to question the authenticity of Jamie's victory. The tweet that followed would send shockwaves through the tech world. Impossible. A human should not be able to outsmart a machine like Orion. A rematch is in order. The message was short, but its implications were profound. Elon Musk, known for his groundbreaking work in artificial intelligence and space travel, was openly doubting Jamie's achievement. Musk, of course, had never been one to shy away from controversy, and his statement only fueled the fire. The tweet was both a challenge and a statement. Musk was questioning the entire premise of the competition. Could a human really outperform a machine that had been programmed to think faster, learn more efficiently, and solve problems with an accuracy that surpassed any human's abilities? Musk didn't believe it. In an interview shortly after the tweet, Musk elaborated on his position. "Look, Jamie Walker is undoubtedly a talented coder," Musk said, his voice calm but firm. "But there's no way a human brain could outsmart a machine like Orion, not in the way he claims. Machines don't have the flaws humans have. They don't get tired, they don't miss a step. There's something off about this. A rematch is the only way to prove this wasn't just a glitch." The media exploded with reactions. Some sided with Musk, calling Jamie's victory a lucky break or a flaw in the competition's setup. Others rallied behind Jamie, cheering for the underdog who had dared to challenge the machine. The internet was divided. Jamie, for his part, stayed quiet for the most part. He had never been one to engage in public drama. But in the quiet moments, after all the excitement had died down, he couldn't shake the unease growing inside him. What if Musk was right? What if his win really had been a fluke? Could he replicate the feat? Or was this all just a one-time thing? A week after Musk's tweet, Jamie sat in front of his computer, scrolling through the endless messages and comments. Most were encouraging, but some were harsh. "Fluke" and "fraud" appeared in the comments under every video and news article about him. It was almost impossible to ignore. That's when Jamie made the decision. He didn't want to back down. He wasn't going to let someone like Musk dismiss his hard work. So, he posted a video response on his social media platforms, addressing the accusations head-on. "Hey everyone, Jamie Walker here," he started, his voice steady but a little nervous. "I know a lot of people are questioning how I beat Orion. I get it. No one thought it was possible. But the truth is, I didn't beat the machine because I'm smarter. I beat it because I approached the problem differently. I used creativity and intuition to solve the puzzle in a way a machine couldn't. And that's the real message here. Machines are incredible, but they're limited by their programming. Humans aren't." He paused, taking a breath. "I'm not saying I'm better than Orion, or that machines can't be powerful, but I believe we need to stop thinking of AI as something that will replace us. We need to start thinking about how we can work with AI, how we can use our unique human abilities to complement what they do best." The video went viral. Some people applauded Jamie for his maturity and insight, while others dismissed it as a desperate attempt to save face. But Jamie didn't care about the critics. He cared about one thing: proving that humans could still innovate in a world increasingly dominated by machines. And then, just like that, the rematch was announced. Elon Musk's challenge to Jamie was official. The world would watch as the young coder faced off against the machine again. But this time, it would be different. This time, Jamie would be under the microscope. The stakes were higher. The pressure was crushing. But Jamie was ready. He had nothing to prove to anyone except himself. And if he was going to take down Orion again, he would do it on his own terms. The weight of the world was on Jamie Walker's shoulders. The moment Elon Musk had issued his challenge, the countdown began. This wasn't just a simple rematch. It was going to be the ultimate test of human ingenuity versus artificial intelligence. The stakes were higher now. Jamie wasn't just competing for recognition or pride anymore. He was fighting to prove that humans still had something machines couldn't replicate: creativity. The world was watching, and the expectations were suffocating. Every major tech outlet, every social media platform, every coding forum, everyone was following Jamie's every move. Would he rise to the challenge, or would he crumble under the pressure? Would he prove that his win wasn't a fluke, or would Elon Musk's doubts turn out to be true? Jamie wasn't the same quiet teenager anymore. The constant stream of media requests, the phone calls, the public appearances, everything had changed. His life, once small and focused on his computer screen, had expanded into something much larger, and with it came the overwhelming burden of expectations. But Jamie wasn't distracted by the frenzy. He knew that if he wanted to have any chance of winning again, he needed to focus. And so, he retreated into his world of code. "Mom," Jamie said one evening as Linda came into his room, where he was hunched over his laptop, "I think I'm going to need a lot of time to prepare. This is going to be bigger than anything I've ever done." Linda nodded, her face a mixture of pride and concern. I know, Jamie. I know. But remember, you don't have to do this for anyone but yourself. Jamie paused. He wanted to say that he wasn't just doing it for himself. He was doing it to prove something, to the world, to Elon Musk, to all the doubters. But he didn't voice that out loud. Instead, he just nodded. I'll make sure you have the space you need, Linda said, before she left his room, closing the door quietly behind her. Jamie's first step in preparing for the rematch was to study Orion deeply. He had watched the initial contest over and over again, analyzing every move, every misstep, every moment where the machine had faltered. He didn't just want to find a flaw in the machine's algorithm. He wanted to understand its thought process, its decision-making structure, how it had been designed to think. Orion wasn't a simple machine. It was the product of cutting-edge technology, programmed to adapt and learn in real time. If Jamie wanted a chance to beat it again, he had to learn how it learned. He began reading through AI research papers, coding books, and studying the latest advancements in machine learning. He reached out to experts in the field, asking questions and gathering advice. Each day, he would go deeper, poring over complex algorithms and machine learning models, trying to crack the code behind Orion's intelligence. But even with all of his preparation, Jamie couldn't help but feel a sense of doubt creeping in. The pressure was enormous. He was no longer just Jamie Walker from a small town. He was the kid who had beaten Orion, and now everyone expected him to do it again. But Jamie wasn't just battling Orion anymore. He was battling his own insecurities. It was late one night when Jamie received a message from someone he hadn't heard from in months, his old friend, Zach. Zach had been Jamie's closest friend back in middle school, before Jamie's coding skills set him apart, and he started focusing solely on his passion. They had shared long nights talking about their dreams of becoming game developers and changing the world with technology. But after Jamie started winning competitions and getting more serious about coding, Zach had drifted away. Now, Zach's message read simply, "Hey man, I saw what's going on. You got this. Let's meet up for old time's sake." Jamie hesitated for a moment, unsure. He wasn't sure if he was ready to reconnect. But something about Zach's message felt right. Maybe he just needed to talk to someone who wasn't caught up in the media circus. Someone who still saw him as just Jamie. A few hours later, they were sitting at a diner in town, the soft hum of the neon lights overhead and the smell of coffee in the air. Zach had changed, but not in the ways Jamie expected. He wasn't some tech mogul or coding prodigy. He was just Zach, still working at a local car repair shop, living life in the same small town they had grown up in. "So, how's it feel, man?" Zach asked, his voice casual as he leaned back in his chair. "You're literally a legend now. Everyone knows your name." Jamie gave a small, tight-lipped smile. "Feels kind of weird. I don't think I'm ready for all this. I'm just a kid from here. I don't know if I can do it again." Zach raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean, do it again?" "You beat a machine, Jamie. That's something nobody thought was possible. And you didn't just win. You outsmarted it. That's way bigger than anything anyone expected." Jamie looked down at his hands, fingers twitching with nervous energy. "Yeah, but now Musk's challenging me. What if I mess it up? What if I can't do it again?" Zach leaned forward, looking Jamie directly in the eyes. "Jamie, you're not just some kid who got lucky. You're the guy who figured out how to think differently. That's what got you here. And if anyone can do it again, it's you." Jamie took a deep breath, the weight of Zach's words sinking in. For the first time in days, he felt a spark of confidence. "You're right," Jamie said slowly. "I'm not just doing this for the prize or the fame. I'm doing it because I know I can." Zach smiled, a genuine, unspoken understanding passing between them. "And you'll show everyone that it wasn't a fluke." The next morning, as Jamie sat in front of his laptop once again, a renewed sense of purpose washed over him. He had been so focused on the pressure of the rematch that he had forgotten why he started coding in the first place. It wasn't about proving anyone wrong. It was about creating, solving problems, and using his mind to change the world. And now, he had a new clarity. The rematch wasn't just about defeating Orion. It was about proving that humans, with all their creativity, intuition, and flaws, could still outsmart the machines. He had already beaten Orion once, and he wasn't going to let anyone, including Elon Musk, tell him it was a fluke. With that thought in his mind, Jamie dove back into his research, determined to push the boundaries even further. But with every breakthrough came a new wave of uncertainty. Orion wasn't just a machine. It was an evolving system, constantly adapting and learning from every mistake. The rematch would be unlike anything Jamie had ever experienced. He wasn't just coding against a static program anymore. He was coding against a machine that would study his every move and learn from it. The pressure was mounting, but Jamie was ready. He had to be. The day of the rematch had arrived. It was unlike any other competition Jamie had ever entered. This wasn't just another coding contest. This wasn't about a prize or recognition. This was the ultimate test of human versus machine, the battle between one man's creativity and the computational power of one of the most advanced AI systems ever created. The world was watching, holding its breath. Jamie sat in front of his computer, his fingers hovering above the keys. He wasn't nervous, not exactly, but there was a heavy weight pressing down on him. He had prepared for weeks, spent sleepless nights coding, analyzing Orion's every move from the last contest. But this time would be different. This time, there was no room for error, no space for doubt. He was about to face the machine that had been built to learn, adapt, and solve problems faster than any human ever could. And he had to beat it again. The competition wasn't taking place in a conference room or a crowded hall. This time, it was all virtual. The global audience was tuned in online, watching the live stream of Jamie and Orion as they faced off. Elon Musk himself was watching from the front row of a massive digital arena. It wasn't just a contest of code. It had become an event, a spectacle. The stakes were no longer just professional. They were personal. The rules were simple. Jamie and Orion would both be tasked with solving a series of complex problems, designed to test their ability to adapt, innovate, and think critically. The problems would grow progressively harder, the algorithms more intricate, and the challenges more unpredictable. It would be a true test of human ingenuity against artificial intelligence. Jamie took a deep breath, feeling his pulse quicken. He had seen the first problem already. It was a massive data analysis task, a challenge that would require careful pattern recognition and the ability to optimize solutions. But the machine wasn't going to make it easy. The timer started. Immediately, Jamie dove into the task. His mind was racing, the algorithms flashing in his mind like 1,000 gears turning at once. He could see the patterns emerging. He could feel the pieces of the puzzle fitting together. His fingers flew across the keyboard as he typed furiously, writing and rewriting code, testing and retesting his logic. He could hear the soft hum of his computer, the only sound in the quiet room, as the contest intensified. Meanwhile, Orion was already beginning its work. The machine's calculations were near instantaneous, analyzing the problem and coming up with a potential solution at speeds Jamie couldn't match. But Orion wasn't designed to think outside the box. It could only work with the data it was given. And Jamie had learned something critical from the last contest. Machines could only think within the boundaries of their programming. They couldn't adapt to new, unexpected approaches. As Jamie worked, he quickly identified a flaw in the way Orion was processing the data, a subtle oversight in the way it was handling certain variables. It was a flaw that no one else would have noticed. But Jamie did. He pushed forward, crafting a solution that took advantage of the machine's limitations. When the buzzer rang, signaling the end of the round, Jamie leaned back, his heart pounding. He wasn't sure if he had done enough to outpace Orion. But when the results flashed on the screen, his heart skipped a beat. Jamie, 1. Orion, 0. For a moment, there was silence. Jamie stared at the screen in disbelief. He had won the first round. But before he could celebrate, the weight of the moment hit him. This wasn't just about the contest. This was about proving something to himself and to everyone watching. Elon Musk's eyes were fixed on the screen. The world's most brilliant tech mind was watching, waiting for a mistake, for a chink in Jamie's armor. Musk didn't seem impressed, but his lack of reaction only made Jamie more determined. This wasn't just about winning. It was about showing that the creative power of the human mind could still triumph over cold, calculating machines. The second problem appeared on the screen. It was harder, much harder. It was a deep learning challenge, a task that would require both advanced coding skills and the ability to adjust the algorithm's learning process in real time. This was a test of Jamie's ability to handle complexity, to think on his feet, to innovate under pressure. Jamie had been practicing for weeks, running simulations, adjusting neural networks, and developing new techniques. He'd already spent countless hours preparing, but the stakes felt different now. The pressure was mounting. The eyes of the world were on him. And more than anything, there was Musk, waiting to see if Jamie's initial success had been a fluke. Jamie's fingers hovered over the keyboard. He needed to get this right. He had to. He started coding, quickly finding patterns in the dataset, adjusting weights, and fine-tuning his model. The problem was evolving in real time, but Jamie didn't panic. He had prepared for this. His experience, his ability to adapt on the fly. This was where his humanity could outshine the machine. Orion, on the other hand, was already deep into the problem, processing it at a speed Jamie could only dream of. The machine had a clear advantage in raw processing power. But Jamie didn't need speed. He needed precision. He needed creativity. As the clock ticked down, Jamie pushed his solution to the limit. It wasn't perfect, but it was unique. A few last-minute adjustments, and he hit enter just as the timer ran out. Jamie's heart was in his throat. He watched as the results came in. For a second, everything felt frozen. Jamie, 2. Orion, 0. The crowd went wild. Jamie had done it again. He had solved the second problem and maintained his lead. But there was a catch. This wasn't over yet. The third and final problem was about to begin. The hardest challenge of them all. The one that would truly test everything Jamie had learned, everything he had worked for. And as the clock ticked down to 0, Jamie realized that the final round would be the true test of his spirit, his resolve, and his understanding of the future of human innovation. The camera cut to Elon Musk, who was staring intently at the screen. His expression was unreadable, but there was a hint of something. Curiosity, maybe even respect. It was clear that Musk wasn't just watching a contest anymore. He was watching a moment of history unfold. Jamie wasn't just a competitor anymore. He was a symbol of everything that made human potential so powerful. And that's when Jamie realized this wasn't about proving himself to Elon Musk or to anyone else. This was about showing the world and himself that human creativity, despite its flaws, was something machines could never replicate. The final round loomed ahead. The air was thick with tension. The countdown had begun. This was it, the final round of the most anticipated coding contest the world had ever seen. Jamie Walker versus Orion, the AI created by Elon Musk's tech empire. It was no longer just about coding. It was about the future of technology, the boundaries between human ingenuity and machine learning, and whether a teenager from a small town could truly outsmart a system built to be perfect. Jamie took a deep breath and steadied himself. His palms were clammy, his heart racing. The last 2 rounds had been incredible, but they were just warm-ups. This third and final problem would be the one to decide it all. The screen in front of Jamie flashed to life. A complex problem filled with layers of encryption, data streams, and multidimensional puzzles stared back at him. It was unlike anything he had seen before. The challenge was a synthesis of multiple coding languages and cutting-edge AI frameworks. The complexity was off the charts. But Jamie didn't panic. He knew what he had to do. Orion had already started its work. The machine was analyzing the problem at an almost incomprehensible speed, breaking it down into smaller, more manageable pieces. It was designed to solve problems faster than any human could dream. But Jamie had something Orion didn't: imagination. The ability to think outside the boundaries of pure logic. Jamie closed his eyes for a moment. He could feel the weight of the world pressing down on him. Every eye on the planet seemed to be watching him, waiting for him to make a mistake. But deep down, he knew this was his moment. This was the opportunity to prove something much bigger than himself. This was about showing that human creativity and innovation were still invaluable, no matter how advanced the technology. The timer was ticking down. The competition had reached its boiling point. Jamie typed furiously, his fingers moving faster than he had ever thought possible. Every line of code had to be precise. Every step had to be calculated. He was applying everything he had learned in the last few weeks, pushing his coding skills to the limit. There was no room for error. Orion, on the other hand, was already speeding through the problem. Its processing power seemed endless, its algorithms working in perfect synchronicity. It was clear the machine had an advantage in terms of sheer computational power. But Jamie wasn't trying to compete on raw speed. He was searching for a breakthrough, an insight, a twist in the problem that the machine might miss. That was his edge. As the clock neared zero, Jamie's mind raced. He could feel his heart pounding in his chest. He wasn't just coding anymore. He was creating. The lines of code became fluid, dynamic, more than just syntax and logic. They were building something new, something unexpected. The final seconds ticked away. Jamie's screen flashed. He had done it. With a deep breath, he pressed Enter, sending his solution to the server. He watched as the system processed the solution, each second stretching into eternity. The results appeared on the screen. Jamie, 3. Orion, 2. Jamie had done it. Against all odds, he had beaten Orion. Not just once, not just twice, but 3 times. The impossible had been achieved. For a moment, Jamie just sat there, staring at the screen in disbelief. His mind struggled to process the magnitude of what had just happened. He had outsmarted one of the most advanced AI systems in the world. He had proven that, even in an age dominated by technology, there was still room for human creativity. The camera cut to Elon Musk's face, which was now visible on the livestream. His expression was one of quiet admiration. Jamie couldn't help but notice that Musk didn't look angry or frustrated. He looked impressed. For all his tech genius, Musk knew what Jamie had done was extraordinary. "Congratulations, Jamie." Musk's voice came through the speakers, steady and sincere. "You've proven something today. I didn't expect this, but I respect it." Jamie's heart swelled. Hearing those words from Elon Musk, one of the greatest minds in technology, was validation in a way that no amount of fame or accolades could ever provide. It wasn't just about proving Musk wrong. It was about proving that the human mind, with all its flaws, creativity, and unpredictability, was something truly irreplaceable. As Jamie stood up from his desk, he felt a strange sense of calm wash over him. The adrenaline, the tension, the pressure, they all melted away in that single moment. The world had watched him, scrutinized every move he made, and yet he had prevailed. But more than that, he had learned something far more valuable than any victory. This contest had started as a way to prove himself, first to Elon Musk, then to the world. But in the end, it wasn't about the win. It was about the journey, the coding, the learning, the growing. He realized that the true value of this experience wasn't in defeating a machine. It was in proving to himself that he could overcome any obstacle, no matter how daunting. He looked at the screen one last time, a quiet smile forming on his face. The road ahead was uncertain, but Jamie knew now that he had the strength to face whatever came next. The aftermath of the contest was swift and intense. News outlets around the world exploded with the story. Headlines flashed across social media. Teen beats AI in historic coding contest. Jamie Walker outsmarts Orion, proving human ingenuity still reigns. The world's eyes were now firmly focused on Jamie Walker. The kid from a small town had just rewritten the narrative of what was possible. Elon Musk's reaction was equally public. In a tweet that went viral, Musk wrote, "We've learned a lot from today's contest. Jamie showed us that the human mind can still do things machines can't. This is just the beginning. #The future is human." It was a moment that would go down in history as a turning point in the relationship between humans and AI. But for Jamie, none of that mattered as much as the realization that he had just completed one of the most important chapters of his life. The world had changed, but so had he. No longer was he the kid with a dream. He was now someone who had proven that dreams could become reality, no matter how impossible they seemed. As Jamie stepped out into the sunlight for the first time in what felt like days, he felt a weight lift off his shoulders. The world was wide open to him now. There were new challenges ahead, new projects, new frontiers to explore. And while the contest had ended, the journey was far from over. He turned to see his mom, Linda, standing in the doorway, a proud smile on her face. "You did it, Jamie," she said softly. "I always knew you would." Jamie smiled back, his heart full. "Yeah, I did. And I think this is just the beginning. The next few weeks were a blur for Jamie. His victory over Orion made headlines around the world, and his name was now synonymous with innovation, defying the odds, and showcasing the incredible potential of human ingenuity. The flood of media requests, interviews, and messages from people all over the globe was overwhelming. Yet, amid all the attention and excitement, Jamie felt a quiet calm, a sense of peace he hadn't expected. He sat at his desk late one night, the glow of his computer screen the only light in the room, reflecting on the whirlwind that had become his life. He had proven something to the world, and to himself. But now, as the dust began to settle, he had to think about what came next. The contest was over, but the journey was far from complete. Jamie Walker, the kid who beat Orion. It was a title that sounded both surreal and strangely fitting. His life had completely shifted. He was no longer just a teenager who loved coding in his spare time. He was a global symbol of resistance to the growing dominance of artificial intelligence. It wasn't just about fame. It was about the expectations that came with it. The phone calls kept coming, offers for talks, sponsorships, interviews, even requests from top universities. Everyone wanted a piece of him, to understand how he did it, what drove him, and how he could help lead the world into a new age of technology. He was now a figurehead for the future of tech, a young visionary that the world was eager to follow. But Jamie wasn't sure if he was ready for all of this. He'd only just started this journey. Was he really the right person to lead this revolution? Would he live up to everyone's expectations? The pressure weighed heavily on his shoulders. At the same time, Jamie couldn't help but feel a growing sense of responsibility. What if his victory wasn't just about outsmarting a machine, but about something deeper? A sign that humanity needed to rethink its relationship with technology. The stakes had shifted, and Jamie realized he was standing at the crossroads of a new era. The first sign of things changing came when Elon Musk reached out to him directly. Musk, a man of few words when it came to personal matters, had written a message that caught Jamie by surprise. "I watched your rematch. You've shown that there's still room for human innovation in a world that's increasingly defined by artificial intelligence. I think we need to have a conversation about the future. Let's talk soon." It wasn't just a congratulatory note. It was an invitation, one that signified Musk's recognition of Jamie's importance in the coming age of AI. Elon Musk wasn't just a tech billionaire. He was the architect of SpaceX, Tesla, Neuralink, and a myriad of other cutting-edge projects that would shape humanity's future. A conversation with Musk could open doors Jamie had never dreamed of. He hesitated, unsure of how to respond. Part of him was excited, but another part felt a sense of intimidation. He had just been thrust into the world's spotlight. How could he possibly contribute to something as immense as shaping the future of humanity? But as the days passed, Jamie found himself thinking more and more about the conversation he needed to have with Musk. If there was one thing the rematch had taught him, it was that he was capable of more than he had ever realized. This was the opportunity to contribute something meaningful, something that could impact the world on a global scale. The call came late one afternoon. Jamie's hands shook slightly as he picked up the phone. His screen flashed. Elon Musk. He took a deep breath before answering. "Jamie," Musk's voice crackled through the speaker, calm but urgent. "I've been thinking about your victory over Orion. I've always believed in pushing the boundaries of what's possible, but you've shown me something I didn't expect. You've demonstrated that humans still have a unique advantage over AI, one that no machine will ever replicate. We need that. The world needs that. And I think you can help us figure out how." Jamie was quiet for a moment, trying to process Musk's words. The conversation felt surreal. "Thank you, Mr. Musk," Jamie replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "But I'm just a kid with a lot to learn. I don't know if I'm ready for something like this." Musk chuckled, the sound warm and reassuring. "No one's ever ready, Jamie. But that's the point. We create what we need as we go. What I'm asking you is simple. We need someone who can think like you. Someone who can see past the algorithms and code and remind us all why we do this in the first place." Jamie's mind raced. It was one thing to win a coding contest. It was another thing entirely to be asked to help shape the future of humanity's relationship with technology. But Musk was right about one thing. He had the ability to think beyond just lines of code, to challenge assumptions and find new ways to solve problems. That's what had set him apart in the rematch. "I'm in," Jamie said. "Finally, what do you need me to do?" From that moment on, Jamie's life began to take a new direction. Musk invited him to visit Tesla and SpaceX, where Jamie spent time with the engineers and innovators behind some of the most ambitious projects of the 21st century. He was introduced to teams working on advanced AI systems, self-driving cars, and even the latest iterations of Mars colonization technology. It was a world Jamie had only dreamed of, and now he was living it. But it wasn't just about technology. As Jamie spent more time with Musk and the team at Tesla, he began to understand that this was about much more than just pushing the limits of what machines could do. It was about ensuring that humanity stayed at the helm of its own future, using technology to enhance human lives rather than replace them. Elon Musk became more than just a mentor. He became a guide, someone who helped Jamie see the bigger picture. Together, they began to explore the ethical questions surrounding AI, the future of work, and how humans could continue to thrive in a world where machines were becoming more capable every day. Jamie wasn't just a kid anymore. He was part of a movement, one that could shape the future in ways no one could predict. Sitting in his office late one evening, Jamie thought back to the moment when he had defeated Orion. It felt like a lifetime ago. At the time, it had felt like the culmination of everything. His victory over a machine, his rise to fame, his newfound responsibility. But now, as he reflected on everything that had happened, Jamie realized that the victory had been only the beginning. He had proven that humans still had a vital role in the world of technology, that no matter how powerful AI became, there was something uniquely human that no machine could replicate. The ability to dream, to innovate, to connect. And in that truth, Jamie had found his purpose. As he looked at the world beyond his office window, Jamie understood now that the journey wasn't about beating the machine. It was about showing the world that technology, when used right, could serve humanity, not replace it. There was still so much to do, so much to learn, and so many challenges ahead. But Jamie was no longer just a boy who beat a computer. He was a young man standing at the forefront of a revolution where humans and machines would work together, side by side, to build a better future. And he was ready for whatever came next. The months after Jamie's victory over Orion felt like a dream. Every new day brought with it new challenges, new discoveries, and, most exciting of all, new opportunities. Yet, despite the whirlwind of media attention, high-profile meetings, and a growing list of prestigious offers, Jamie's core motivation hadn't changed. He wanted to make a real difference, not just for himself, but for the world. When Elon Musk invited him to work more closely with the teams at SpaceX and Tesla, Jamie wasn't sure what to expect. What would it mean to work alongside some of the brightest minds in the world? What would it mean to help shape the future of humanity? The idea felt both exhilarating and overwhelming. But one thing was certain, Jamie was ready for the challenge. The first official meeting took place at Tesla's headquarters in Palo Alto. Musk had personally arranged for Jamie to meet with several of the lead engineers and AI specialists working on the company's autonomous driving technology. It was the kind of cutting-edge innovation that seemed like something out of a science fiction novel. But Jamie was no longer just a spectator. He was a part of it now. Jamie had spent weeks preparing, reading everything he could about Tesla's projects, brushing up on his AI knowledge, and trying to wrap his mind around the massive scope of what they were trying to achieve. It wasn't just about building cars. It was about building a new kind of future. A future where machines worked alongside people, enhancing lives rather than replacing them. Elon met Jamie at the entrance with his trademark intensity, a mix of enthusiasm and razor-sharp focus. He wasted no time. "Jamie," Musk said, gesturing toward the expansive office building behind him, "we're here to change the world. And I think you're the one who can help us do it. Let me show you around." The tour of the Tesla campus was unlike anything Jamie had ever experienced. He walked through halls lined with state-of-the-art labs, robotic arms, and self-driving vehicles in various stages of development. Every corner was filled with the buzz of innovation. Engineers collaborating, software designers deep in discussion, and mathematicians calculating ways to make AI safer, more efficient, and more human-centered. At one point, Elon led Jamie to the heart of the operation, the autonomous driving department. Here, Jamie met with the lead engineers working on Tesla's new generation of self-driving cars. These cars were designed to not only drive themselves, but also learn from their surroundings and adapt to new conditions. Jamie's eyes widened as one of the engineers pulled up a demo on a large screen, showing a Tesla navigating a complex cityscape, avoiding pedestrians, other vehicles, and responding to sudden traffic changes, all in real time. It's all about making the car more aware of its environment, the engineer explained. But it's also about teaching the car to make decisions, not just follow instructions, but reason like a human. Jamie was fascinated by the possibilities. Here was technology that could potentially save lives, make travel more efficient, and even reduce the carbon footprint. But there were also enormous challenges ahead, challenges that would require more than just coding. It would require empathy, understanding, and the ability to navigate the ethical complexities of integrating AI into everyday life. Jamie's mind raced as he processed everything he had seen. Elon had invited him into this world for a reason. He wanted Jamie to think beyond the code, to consider the human element of all this technology, to be the bridge between machine intelligence and human experience. After the tour, Elon took Jamie to a private meeting room. There, they sat down with a small team of experts, including engineers, futurists, and strategists, to discuss a new initiative, a global vision for AI integration designed not just for efficiency, but for humanity's long-term well-being. "We need your perspective on something," Elon said, leaning forward. "Right now, AI is growing exponentially, but we're reaching a tipping point. If we don't take a step back and consider the bigger picture, how it will impact every person, every community, we could create a future we don't want. You beat Orion because you thought outside the box. We need that kind of thinking now, more than ever." Jamie listened intently, realizing the magnitude of the problem. The world was on the brink of a massive transformation. AI could revolutionize industries, cure diseases, and create a better quality of life for millions. But it also had the potential to disrupt jobs, challenge our concept of free will, and cause widespread ethical dilemmas. How could they ensure AI would be a tool for good, not just a tool for profit or control? Musk's team was already working on several projects aimed at addressing these concerns, but they needed someone who could bridge the gap between technology and ethics, someone who could advocate for a future where humans and AI coexisted, not in opposition, but in partnership. "You've already proven you have the vision we need, Jamie," Elon continued. "But we need more than that. We need to build a framework for AI that considers the emotional, psychological, and social consequences. We need you to help us create that framework." Jamie sat back, overwhelmed by the responsibility. It wasn't just about writing code anymore. This was bigger, much bigger. It was about the future of humanity and the role AI would play in it. He had always dreamed of being part of something that could change the world, but now that dream had become reality. He had been thrust into a world where every decision he made could impact millions of people. Every line of code, every algorithm, every AI framework would shape the future of society. But despite the weight of it all, Jamie felt something stirring inside him. This wasn't the time to back down. This wasn't the time to shy away from the challenge. This was what he had been preparing for his whole life. This was his opportunity to make a real difference. "I'm in," Jamie said, his voice firm. "I'll do whatever it takes to help you build a future that works for everyone. A future where AI can help people without replacing them, where it can enhance lives and create new possibilities without leaving anyone behind." Elon smiled. "I knew you'd get it. Welcome to the team, Jamie. We've got a lot of work ahead of us." As Jamie shook hands with Elon, he felt a surge of excitement mixed with a deep sense of purpose. The road ahead would be difficult, filled with challenges and obstacles, but he was no longer just a kid who had beaten an AI. He was now a part of something that could change the course of history. Over the next few weeks, Jamie immersed himself in Tesla's projects, working closely with engineers and AI specialists to develop new systems for autonomous vehicles, energy-efficient technologies, and smart cities. But his main focus was on shaping the ethical guidelines for AI development, ensuring that the technology was being used responsibly with a deep respect for human dignity and rights. As Jamie delved deeper into the complexities of AI and ethics, he realized just how much the world had changed in such a short time. It was no longer about simply creating the most powerful AI. It was about ensuring that AI was aligned with humanity's best interests. He began to work on a new initiative within the company, an AI ethics board, a global platform where industry leaders, philosophers, ethicists, and policymakers could come together to discuss the future of AI, establish guidelines, and ensure that AI systems were being developed with the utmost care and consideration for human impact. One evening, as Jamie sat in his office looking out over the Tesla campus, he reflected on everything that had happened. A year ago, he was a teenager with a dream. Today, he was part of a movement that was shaping the future of technology. It was a future filled with endless possibilities. But as he knew all too well, it was also one that required careful thought, responsibility, and an unwavering commitment to the greater good. The challenges were immense, but Jamie was ready. The work had only just begun, and with that, he knew he had found his purpose. The next phase of Jamie's journey with Tesla and Elon Musk's broader vision was nothing short of revolutionary. As Jamie began working with the global team of engineers and thought leaders, the stakes felt higher than ever. The mission was no longer just about pushing the limits of what technology could do. It was about ensuring that technology served humanity, not the other way around. Despite the groundbreaking work happening at Tesla, Jamie felt the weight of a growing, invisible divide in the tech community. On one side were the idealists, those who believed in using technology for the betterment of humanity, who advocated for transparency, fairness, and inclusivity. On the other side were those who saw AI as a tool for domination, a means of control, and a force to be harnessed for profit. The more Jamie worked on the AI ethics board, the more he realized just how profound the ethical implications of AI were. Tesla's autonomous cars, which Jamie had once marveled at, were just the tip of the iceberg. As AI grew more powerful, it could shape everything from healthcare and education to criminal justice and governance. The potential was limitless, but so was the risk. Every decision about AI, every line of code, could impact people's lives in ways that could either uplift or harm entire populations. The question wasn't just how AI could be used, but how it should be used. And the more Jamie thought about it, the more he realized that the answers weren't simple. One evening, Jamie sat in the Tesla office's high-tech conference room, surrounded by engineers, ethicists, and futurists. They were discussing an upcoming product launch, a new generation of self-driving cars that could predict and react to human behavior with unprecedented accuracy. The goal was to make them safer than ever before. But as the conversation unfolded, Jamie grew increasingly uneasy. The engineers were focused on the technical achievements, the speed at which their AI could process data, the precision with which it could calculate and adapt to driving conditions. But the ethicists were asking a different kind of question. What happens when AI must make a decision involving human life? What if the car has to decide between saving the driver or a pedestrian? One ethicist asked. How do we program it to make that choice? What are the criteria it should use? The room went silent. The engineers fidgeted in their seats, unsure how to respond. They were used to solving problems with code, but this was something entirely different. It was a moral dilemma. Jamie sat quietly, absorbing the weight of the question. He had always been a thinker, someone who loved to solve puzzles and outsmart systems. But now, for the first time, he was confronted with a question that didn't have a clear answer. It wasn't about optimizing code or increasing efficiency. It was about balancing human life, emotions, and ethics with the cold logic of a machine. Finally, Jamie spoke up. We can't just think about this in terms of probabilities and outcomes. AI can't replace human judgment, especially when lives are at stake. We need to teach AI to prioritize empathy, not just efficiency. It should be guided by a moral framework that respects human dignity, not just a set of rules. Elon Musk, who had been listening intently, nodded thoughtfully. You're right, Jamie. This is exactly what I'm talking about. We've been so focused on what AI can do that we've forgotten to think about what it should do. We need a new approach, one that incorporates not just the science, but the humanity. Over the following weeks, Jamie found himself increasingly at the center of conversations that seemed to span the deepest philosophical questions of our time. The AI Ethics Board was formed in earnest, with Jamie playing a pivotal role in developing a new framework that would guide Tesla's AI development moving forward. It wasn't just about what AI could achieve, but about what it should strive for in the long term. Jamie and the team worked tirelessly, collaborating with ethicists, philosophers, legal experts, and even psychologists to create a set of guiding principles for AI development. These principles were centered on key values: empathy, fairness, transparency, and accountability. They sought to create a vision where AI didn't just act as an efficient tool, but as a thoughtful, human-centered partner. Jamie's role in these discussions grew. His ability to think critically about the ethical ramifications of AI and his passion for keeping humanity at the heart of technology made him a key voice in the room. Yet, as the work continued, he began to realize just how difficult it was to bring such an ambitious vision to life. While Jamie and the team at Tesla pushed forward with their new AI framework, not everyone in the tech world was on the same page. There were powerful voices within the industry that believed in the unrestrained development of AI. Those who felt that regulating AI's impact was a mistake, that it would stifle innovation and slow down progress. One morning, Jamie received an email from a prominent tech journalist. It was an opinion piece written by a well-known figure in Silicon Valley who argued that the focus on ethics in AI was a dangerous distraction. The piece made a compelling case. The faster AI progressed, the more benefits it could bring to humanity. Slowing down to address ethical concerns, the article argued, was like tying a race car's wheels together just as it was about to hit top speed. The word stung, and Jamie felt a surge of frustration. How could anyone argue that ethics didn't matter when the very lives of people could be at stake? But as he reread the article, he couldn't deny that the journalist's arguments were persuasive. After all, AI could be used to solve some of the world's most pressing problems, from curing diseases to combating climate change. Shouldn't the world be accelerating its efforts, rather than slowing down to deliberate on philosophical questions? Jamie closed his laptop and sat back in his chair, overwhelmed. The opposition was louder now. The stakes were higher. And the responsibility he felt was growing heavier by the day. Could they really strike the balance between rapid progress and moral responsibility? As Jamie continued to navigate this ethical minefield, he found himself questioning his own beliefs. What was the right approach? Was it better to focus on progress, or was it more important to ensure that AI development served humanity's best interests, even if it meant slowing things down? At times, the questions felt paralyzing. He could feel the weight of the world on his shoulders, and the pressure to make the right decisions was starting to take its toll. Even his friends and family began to notice a shift in him. "I can see it in your face," his sister Lucy said one evening. "You're carrying the weight of the world. Are you okay?" Jamie smiled weakly, but deep down, he knew she was right. He wasn't okay. He was consumed by the work, by the endless meetings, by the burden of trying to shape the future of humanity. But even as the pressure mounted, he knew there was no turning back. He couldn't walk away from the work he was doing, not when the future of the world was at stake. That night, as Jamie lay in bed staring at the ceiling, he had a moment of clarity. The world was changing, faster than anyone could keep up with, but that didn't mean he had to give up on his values. He didn't have to choose between progress and ethics. It wasn't about slowing down. It was about ensuring that AI didn't outpace humanity's ability to control it, to understand it, and to use it for good. The next morning, Jamie walked into the office with a renewed sense of purpose. The road ahead was still unclear, but he knew one thing for certain. He was going to fight for a future where AI and humanity could thrive together, not at odds with one another. And no matter how difficult the struggle, he would continue to push forward. What do you think is the most important aspect of AI development? Should progress take priority, or is it more important to ensure AI is ethical and human-centered? Drop a comment below and share your thoughts. And don't forget to subscribe for more updates on Jamie's journey and the future of technology. Jamie's ethical dilemma is far from over, and the questions he faces are becoming even more complex. Would you like to continue following his journey as he navigates the fine line between progress and responsibility? Stay tuned. As Jamie became more immersed in his work at Tesla and SpaceX, the weight of the responsibility he carried only intensified. With each new breakthrough in artificial intelligence, the world grew more eager for progress, but that same world also began to demand answers. What was the true cost of innovation? Was humanity prepared for the consequences of its creations? The pressure was mounting, and Jamie knew that he was at a critical crossroads in his life. Tesla's new AI-powered initiatives were making headlines every week. The autonomous cars that Jamie had helped refine were being hailed as a revolution in transportation, with millions of people around the world eager to get their hands on the new vehicles. However, the excitement came with a growing sense of unease. As AI began to infiltrate every aspect of society, from self-driving cars to AI-assisted healthcare, the question arose. At what point does technology begin to overpower human autonomy? Jamie had seen both sides of the debate firsthand. At Tesla's headquarters, engineers were obsessed with pushing the boundaries of what was possible, creating smarter, faster, and more intuitive machines. But as he worked closely with ethicists and philosophers, Jamie understood that the bigger question was not how fast AI could evolve, but whether society was truly prepared for its wide-reaching implications. A global summit on AI ethics was being organized by the United Nations, and Jamie had been invited as a key speaker. The pressure was on. He was about to step into the spotlight on the world stage, where the entire debate about the role of AI in society would unfold in front of a global audience. As the summit approached, Jamie's anxiety grew. He spent countless hours preparing, reading research papers, meeting with other experts, and practicing his speech. This was his chance to share his vision for a future where technology and humanity work together, where AI was a tool for good, not just for efficiency or profit. But despite his preparation, he knew that what he said would be scrutinized by millions. In private moments, when the weight of his responsibilities felt too much to bear, Jamie often found himself questioning his decisions. Was he truly making the right choice? Was he being too idealistic? The voices in the tech industry were growing louder, urging faster innovation, urging him to prioritize progress over caution. But was that the right path? The UN AI Ethics Summit was held in Geneva, Switzerland, a city that had long been a hub for global diplomacy. The venue was packed with journalists, government leaders, tech giants, and scientists. The atmosphere was electric with anticipation. The stage was set for the most important conversation of the decade. How would AI shape the future of humanity? Jamie arrived early, his mind racing with all the possible questions that might come his way. He had met some of the other speakers beforehand, prominent figures in the AI and technology industries, many of whom had opposing views about the role of ethics in AI development. Some believed that the focus on AI ethics was a hindrance to progress. Others, like Jamie, believed that without a moral framework, AI could easily spiral into a force that could harm more than help. When Jamie's turn finally came to speak, the room fell silent. He took a deep breath, scanning the faces of the audience. For the first time in his career, the weight of the world felt overwhelming. The fate of AI, and perhaps the future of humanity, was, in some ways, in his hands. He began speaking with confidence, but as he outlined the principles of AI ethics that had guided his work at Tesla, he couldn't help but feel the tension in the room. The audience was divided. Some nodded in agreement, while others, particularly from the corporate sector, looked impatient. "We stand at the crossroads of history," Jamie said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "We have the opportunity to shape the future of AI, but we must do so with caution. Progress cannot come at the cost of human dignity. We must build AI that serves humanity, not replaces it. AI should amplify our best qualities, our empathy, our creativity, our compassion, not undermine them." As soon as Jamie finished his speech, the tension in the room reached a boiling point. Several prominent tech leaders from Silicon Valley stood up to challenge his views. "Jamie," one of them called out, "your vision is admirable, but it's naive. The world needs results. We can't afford to wait for perfect solutions. The faster we push AI forward, the sooner we can solve global crises like poverty, climate change, and disease. Ethics can't slow us down." Jamie felt his pulse quicken. This was the moment he had been dreading, the moment when the idealistic vision of AI collided head-on with the hard reality of economic and technological pressure. Elon Musk, who was also present at the summit, stood up in support of Jamie's position. "There's truth in what Jamie is saying," Elon said, his voice cutting through the room. "We have a responsibility to ensure that AI benefits everyone, not just the powerful. If we move too quickly, we risk creating a future where technology is used to control, not to uplift." But even with Elon's support, the room was divided. The clash between idealism and pragmatism had never been so clear. Jamie realized that the debate over AI was more than just about technology, it was about power. Who would control it, and how would it be used? After the summit, Jamie returned to California, exhausted but more determined than ever. The global debate had only just begun, but one thing was clear. The conversation about AI ethics was far from over. The voices of opposition were loud, and the pressure to move faster and push the limits of technology was unrelenting. But there was also a growing movement on the other side. People who understood that progress must be balanced with responsibility. As Jamie's work with Tesla continued, he began to see that he was no longer just an observer or a participant in the debate. He was now at the forefront of it, helping to shape the future of AI. However, the world's expectations were becoming more complex. The media had started to take notice of Jamie's views, and the scrutiny was only growing. Some celebrated his leadership on ethics, while others criticized him for being too cautious. As he sat in his office late one night, staring out at the stars through the window, Jamie felt the weight of it all. There were no easy answers. The road ahead would require difficult choices, compromises, and sacrifices. But no matter how challenging the path became, Jamie knew that he couldn't afford to remain silent. The world needed a voice advocating for a future where humanity remained at the center of technological progress. Weeks passed, and Jamie's work at Tesla and SpaceX continued. However, as the ethical questions surrounding AI grew, so did Jamie's role. He began receiving invitations to collaborate with governments, other tech companies, and even non-profit organizations to develop international standards for AI ethics. The conversation was no longer just taking place in boardrooms and think tanks. It was spreading to every corner of society. Jamie's next challenge would be his most ambitious yet. He was tasked with helping to create a set of global guidelines for AI, standards that would govern the development, deployment, and regulation of AI systems worldwide. This wasn't just a technical challenge. It was a moral one. And as Jamie accepted the challenge, he knew that this was just the beginning of a much larger journey. As Jamie sat in his office at Tesla, his fingers lightly tapping on his desk, the weight of the global responsibility he had accepted began to sink in. It was no longer just about developing technology or pushing the limits of AI. It was about creating a universal framework, a set of principles that would guide the future of artificial intelligence on a global scale. The decisions he made now would influence not just his company, but the entire trajectory of AI across every industry. The first meeting on AI regulation was set to take place in a private conference room at Tesla's headquarters. Representatives from various governments, top tech firms, and academic institutions were all invited. Jamie had been appointed as the lead advisor for this initiative, tasked with shaping the foundational principles of AI governance. He knew this would be one of the most significant moments in his career, perhaps even his life. As the conference room filled with influential leaders from around the world, Jamie felt the weight of the moment. These were the voices that could define the course of artificial intelligence development for decades to come. But there was something unsettling in the air, a sense that behind the promises of collaboration and progress, hidden agendas lurked. Tech giants, many of whom had built their empires on unchecked innovation, were now calling for self-regulation and open standards that could easily be manipulated to suit their interests. One of the first speakers, a representative from a major tech company, stood up and began to outline their vision for AI regulation. "We believe that the free market is the best regulator," the man said, adjusting his glasses. "Tech companies should be given the autonomy to develop AI solutions without being burdened by restrictive government regulations. AI should evolve freely, as fast as possible, to solve the world's problems. Governments should stay out of the way." Jamie felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He had heard this argument before, how innovation should be unfettered, how regulation stifled progress. But he had seen firsthand the dangers of this unchecked growth. AI had already begun to shape the world in ways people weren't fully prepared for. The ethical implications were too large to be left to the whims of a few powerful corporations. When it was his turn to speak, Jamie stood up slowly, taking a deep breath. The eyes of the room were all on him, waiting for him to make his case. He could feel the tension. There was no room for hesitation, no time for second-guessing. I understand the argument for innovation, Jamie began, his voice steady. But the world has seen enough examples of what happens when technology evolves faster than our ability to manage it. Artificial intelligence is not just another tool. It has the power to reshape economies, societies, and even the human experience. Without proper oversight, it could do more harm than good. He paused, looking around the room. We need a global, multi-stakeholder approach to AI governance. This is not about stifling innovation. It's about ensuring that innovation serves the greater good. It's about putting in place guidelines that prioritize human dignity, fairness, and transparency. This is not a question of if we need regulation. It's a question of how we regulate it. The room fell silent. There was no immediate applause, no visible sign of approval, but Jamie could see the shift. Some of the skeptics were nodding thoughtfully. Others, however, were clearly unsettled by the idea of external regulation, especially from governments and public institutions. The representative from the major tech company shot back. And who decides these guidelines, Mr. Jamie? You? A few academics and policymakers? This is a market-driven technology. The people and the innovators should have the final say. Jamie remained calm, though his heart was racing. That's exactly why we need to ensure that people and innovators are held accountable. It cannot be left to one group of stakeholders to decide the fate of billions of people. We need an inclusive framework, one that draws from experts in technology, ethics, law, and human rights. It's about ensuring that AI benefits all of humanity, not just a privileged few. Over the next few weeks, the room for discussion grew more contentious. Jamie's proposal for a multi-stakeholder approach was met with resistance, but he wasn't willing to back down. The world had already seen the dangerous consequences of technology being developed in isolation. Now was the time for cooperation, transparency, and shared responsibility. Jamie worked tirelessly with a team of ethicists, engineers, and legal experts to draft the first set of AI guidelines. The document would outline the core principles that all AI systems must adhere to, ensuring they prioritize safety, fairness, and accountability. These principles would include 1. Transparency. All AI systems should be designed to be explainable and auditable, so that their actions can be understood and traced by humans. 2. Accountability. Developers and organizations should be held accountable for the impact of their AI systems, ensuring that harmful outcomes are mitigated and rectified. 3. Fairness. AI systems must be designed to avoid reinforcing biases or discrimination, and they should promote equality and fairness in decision-making. 4. Safety. AI systems must be rigorously tested to ensure that they do not pose unintended risks to human life or well-being. 5. Human-centered design. AI must be developed with a focus on benefiting humanity, supporting human well-being, and respecting human dignity. Jamie was proud of the guidelines, but he knew that putting them into practice would be an uphill battle. The resistance from some of the tech giants was fierce, and the government representatives were often torn between the pressure from the private sector and the growing public demand for ethical AI development. As the guidelines were presented to various stakeholders, Jamie quickly realized that the resistance wasn't just ideological, it was financial. Many corporations had invested billions into AI projects that could potentially be hindered by these new regulations. The fight for a universal AI framework was becoming a battle between ethics and profits. One afternoon, Jamie received a call from an anonymous number. The voice on the other end was sharp and urgent. "Mr. Jamie, we know what you're trying to do with these regulations," the voice said. "And we're not going to let you push this through. AI is the future. It's the next frontier, and we're not going to let a few well-meaning guidelines slow us down. If you push too hard, there will be consequences." Jamie's hand tightened around the phone. He knew exactly what this was, a veiled threat. This was not just a business disagreement. This was about control, but it only solidified his resolve. Despite the threats, Jamie continued to push forward, determined to ensure that the global AI guidelines would see the light of day. Over the next few months, he traveled to international conferences, held private meetings with key policymakers, and worked tirelessly to build support for the framework. The breakthrough came at an unexpected moment. During a late-night meeting in Paris, Jamie and his team were sitting around a large conference table, exhausted but hopeful. After weeks of lobbying, They had finally convinced several key governments to back the AI guidelines. France, Germany, and Canada were among the first to sign on to the global initiative, with more countries following suit. For the first time, it seemed like the vision of a responsible, ethical AI future was becoming a reality. As Jamie looked out over the city skyline, he felt a wave of relief. They had made it, at least this far. The guidelines would be implemented on a global scale, marking the beginning of a new era in AI development. But Jamie knew the fight was far from over. The world was watching, and the real work had only just begun. With the birth of these guidelines, the question wasn't just about ethics. It was about enforcement, collaboration, and the collective will of humanity to ensure that technology truly served the greater good. With the global AI guidelines finally in place, the world seemed to breathe a collective sigh of relief. But Jamie knew that the real work was only just beginning. While the guidelines had been universally endorsed, their enforcement was an entirely different challenge. Across the globe, governments, corporations, and tech companies would now be expected to abide by these principles, but would they? And if they didn't, who would hold them accountable? Jamie sat at his desk late one evening, staring at the draft of the enforcement framework he had been working on for months. The guidelines were clear, but the mechanisms for ensuring compliance were murky at best. There were no easy answers when it came to global enforcement of AI regulations. How could one central authority govern an industry as vast and rapidly evolving as artificial intelligence? Should countries regulate AI on their own, or should there be a global enforcement body to monitor progress and intervene when necessary? The dilemma weighed heavily on Jamie. The guidelines were designed to ensure that AI benefited humanity, but how could they be applied in the face of powerful corporate interests and government priorities? Some countries, particularly those with less stringent tech regulations, were already pushing back, arguing that too much oversight would stifle innovation. At the same time, certain tech companies were lobbying for leniency, claiming that they needed more freedom to drive advancements without being encumbered by regulation. Jamie needed a solution, and he knew that the only way to move forward was through collaboration, building a system of shared responsibility between governments, corporations, and civil society. After weeks of brainstorming and negotiating, Jamie and his team proposed the creation of a new international body, the AI Accountability Council, AIAC. The idea was ambitious: a global, independent council with representatives from governments, tech companies, academic institutions, and advocacy groups. The AIAC would have the authority to monitor AI projects, assess their compliance with the global guidelines, and step in when necessary to prevent harmful AI deployment. The AIAC would not have direct regulatory power. That would remain in the hands of national governments. Instead, its role would be more advisory and evaluative. It would offer guidance to companies on best practices, conduct audits of AI systems, and issue reports that would be publicly available. If a company violated the guidelines or faced a major failure in an AI project, the AIAC would be able to issue recommendations, publicly expose the issue, and call for corrective actions. The public accountability aspect was key. Corporations would be less likely to ignore the guidelines if their actions were open to scrutiny. While it was a solid concept, the proposal was not without its critics. Many governments were wary of a global body wielding this kind of influence. Some saw it as a threat to their sovereignty. Others questioned whether a body made up of competing interests could really make meaningful decisions. But for Jamie, this was the only way forward. Without accountability, the guidelines would be nothing more than words on paper. The AIAC would be the bridge between idealism and practicality. The AI Accountability Council proposal was put forward at the World Technology Summit in San Francisco, a global gathering of industry leaders, government officials, and influential thought leaders. Jamie, now recognized as one of the foremost authorities on AI ethics, was asked to lead the discussion on the future of AI regulation. It was the perfect opportunity to present the AIAC concept to the world. As Jamie walked onto the stage at the summit, the weight of the moment hit him. This was not just another conference. This was the moment that could shape the future of AI governance. The room was packed with reporters, executives, and diplomats, many of whom had been skeptical of AI regulation from the very beginning. Jamie began his speech by acknowledging the progress that had been made so far. "We've come a long way," he said, looking out at the audience. The AI guidelines are in place, and they represent our best attempt to balance progress with responsibility. But now comes the real test. Ensuring that these guidelines are followed, ensuring that the technology we create doesn't outstrip our ability to control it. He paused for effect, letting the gravity of his words settle, which is why I propose the creation of the AI Accountability Council, a global, independent body tasked with ensuring that AI development adheres to the principles we've outlined. The AIAC will bring together governments, tech companies, civil society, and academia to hold us all accountable. It will monitor progress, audit systems, and ensure that no company, no country, and no individual is allowed to ignore the ethical implications of their actions. The room was silent. Then, as if on cue, the questions began. A government representative from the United States stood up first, his tone skeptical. "Mr. Jamie, this sounds like a noble idea," he said, "but we're talking about creating a global council with power to monitor and evaluate AI projects across borders. What happens if countries refuse to cooperate? What if governments don't agree with the council's recommendations?" Jamie knew this was coming. He had anticipated the concerns about sovereignty. The AIC would not have direct regulatory power over countries, he explained. Rather, its role would be to advise and evaluate. The council would operate as an independent advisory body, providing transparency and public accountability. If a company or government refuses to comply with the guidelines, the AIAC would ensure that the world knows about it. The power of public accountability is immense. A representative from a major tech company chimed in, his voice dripping with concern. "But the world is moving at breakneck speed when it comes to AI. Delaying projects for audits and compliance checks could slow down progress. Can we afford that?" Jamie's eyes met his. "We cannot afford to rush forward blindly. History has shown us that unchecked innovation leads to catastrophic consequences. We need to ensure that AI serves humanity, not the other way around." Despite Jamie's compelling arguments, the AIAC proposal was met with resistance. Governments were divided over how much authority the council should have. Some feared that the AIAC could become a tool for global bureaucracy, slowing innovation. Meanwhile, some tech companies were skeptical of the increased oversight, concerned that their profits could be impacted by regulatory red tape. But Jamie wasn't deterred. He knew that the AIAC was the only real chance to ensure that AI would be developed responsibly. Over the following months, he continued to build support for the proposal, meeting with leaders in government, academia, and the tech industry. Slowly but surely, momentum began to build. One evening, Jamie received a call from Elon Musk. He had been following the AIAC discussions closely and was eager to talk. "I've been thinking about this for a while," Elon said, his voice serious. "You're right. We can't just keep pushing forward without a safety net. The stakes are too high. The AIAC is a good idea, but you'll need everyone on board. And that means making some tough compromises." Jamie's heart raced. "What do you mean?" Elon Musk continued. "I think you'll need to get the major players in tech, people who were initially opposed to the idea, on your side. If you can get them to back this, it'll have the legitimacy you need to push it through. But it's going to be a fight." Jamie knew that Elon was right. The next step would be to secure buy-in from the tech giants who had been resisting regulation. If they could be convinced that the AIAC was in their best interest, it would be a game-changer. After months of battling behind closed doors, Jamie stood at a critical crossroads. The AI Accountability Council (AIAC) proposal was starting to gain traction, but there was one crucial element missing: full support from the biggest tech companies. Without their backing, the council could easily be dismissed as an overreach, a regulatory body with no real power, undermined by the very industry it was supposed to regulate. If Jamie was going to turn the tide in favor of the AIAC, he needed to convince the key players, those who had the most to lose from regulation, that this was a win for everyone. For weeks, Jamie had been in discussions with representatives from major tech companies, trying to understand their objections to the AIAC. It wasn't just about resisting oversight. It was about control. The leaders of these companies believed that the AI revolution was too important to be slowed down by regulatory bodies that could undermine their competitive advantage. For them, innovation meant speed, and speed meant power. He'd been to Silicon Valley countless times, but each meeting felt like walking into a lion's den. On one side of the table, A group of engineers and legal experts worked tirelessly to push for the bare minimum of regulation, advocating for light touch policies that would protect their bottom lines. On the other side, Jamie and his team fought for transparency, accountability, and the global safety of artificial intelligence. It's not just about building AI. It's about building it responsibly, Jamie had said in one such meeting, trying to make his case to one of the top executives at a major AI company. You're in charge of shaping the future of humanity with this technology. It's your responsibility to make sure it doesn't get out of control. The response was always the same. We're already self-regulating. We can police ourselves. We don't need another layer of bureaucracy. But Jamie knew that self-regulation had proven ineffective in the past. Companies had been too eager to push forward without considering the consequences. AI, like any other powerful technology, had the potential to be either a tool for human progress or a catalyst for harm. It wasn't until Jamie received an unexpected call from Mark Zuckerberg, the CEO of Facebook, now Meta, that things started to shift. Jamie had never expected to find common ground with Zuckerberg, who had always been a staunch defender of innovation over regulation. But Zuckerberg, it seemed, had begun to realize the risks of AI advancing without ethical oversight. Jamie, I've been thinking a lot about your proposal, Zuckerberg began on the phone, his voice steady. You're right. We can't just keep pushing forward with these technologies without being more thoughtful. But I'm concerned about how the AIAC might operate in practice. If it becomes a body that's too focused on restricting progress, it could hurt everyone. Jamie had expected resistance, but he also recognized an opportunity. I agree, Jamie replied. That's why the AIAC isn't about shutting things down. It's about creating a framework where innovation can thrive without compromising ethics. It's about transparency, accountability, and ensuring that AI doesn't develop in a vacuum, unchecked by the broader societal consequences. There was a long pause before Zuckerberg spoke again. All right, let's do this. But we need to be sure that the AIAC will be a body of experts, not just politicians and bureaucrats. We need technologists in the room, people who understand the intricacies of AI development. And we need a seat at the table for companies like ours. Jamie's heart raced. This was it, the breakthrough he'd been waiting for. Absolutely, he said. The AIAC needs input from the very people who are developing AI. That's non-negotiable. We need the brightest minds in tech to ensure that the regulations are practical and future-proof. Zuckerberg agreed to back the AIAC publicly, but on one condition. The council would have to include representatives from all major tech companies to ensure fair representation. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. With Zuckerberg's support, Jamie's position strengthened considerably. Now, it was a matter of uniting the other major players. Jamie set up meetings with the CEOs of Google, Amazon, and Microsoft, pushing the same message. AI was too powerful to be left to the whims of individual companies. It needed to be developed responsibly, with input from the global community, including corporations, governments, and the public. One by one, the CEOs began to come around. Jeff Bezos, despite his initial resistance, acknowledged that the AIAC could serve as a bridge between regulation and innovation. Sundar Pichai from Google expressed interest in ensuring that AI developed in ways that were fair and didn't exacerbate existing social inequalities. Satya Nadella of Microsoft, too, agreed that AI should serve a greater societal purpose and that the tech giants needed to be held accountable for their creations. By the end of the month, the coalition had been formed. The major tech companies, including Meta, Microsoft, Google, and Amazon, all publicly supported the AIAC proposal. The tide had turned, and Jamie could feel the momentum building. But there was still one more battle to fight. With the support of the tech giants now secured, Jamie faced a new challenge: public perception. Many advocacy groups, activists, and even everyday citizens had grown wary of the tech industry. They were skeptical that the companies, many of which had been embroiled in scandals over privacy and ethical breaches, would truly follow the guidelines of the AIAC. Jamie knew that securing the trust of the public would be key to the AIAC's success. He needed to make it clear that the council wasn't just a tool for corporate interests, it was a body created to serve the greater good. And that meant transparency and engagement. Jamie and his team organized a global series of public forums to discuss the AIAC's goals and its vision for the future of AI. These forums were held in major cities around the world, from New York to Berlin, Tokyo to Sao Paulo. They were streamed live, with questions from the public sent in via social media. At the first forum in New York, Jamie stood before a packed auditorium. The room was filled with activists, journalists, students, and tech enthusiasts, all eager to know how the AIAC would ensure that big companies didn't just use it as a get-out-of-jail-free card. "We understand the skepticism," Jamie began, his voice steady but firm. "The AIAC is not just an advisory body for companies. It's a watchdog that holds us accountable to the global community. If the companies fail to comply with the guidelines, we'll be the first to call it out. If AI harms society, we'll expose it. The power of the AIAC comes from the public support. It's your trust in us that will make this work." The forums proved to be a success. As the discussions continued, the public began to see the AIAC as a legitimate force for good in the world of AI development. Advocacy groups, once deeply distrustful of the tech industry, started to offer their support, recognizing that the council could provide the kind of oversight and transparency that was desperately needed. A few weeks later, Jamie stood at the front of a press conference in Geneva, surrounded by representatives from governments, the tech industry, and advocacy groups. The AIAC had finally been formed. The AI Accountability Council is here to ensure that artificial intelligence develops in a way that is ethical, transparent, and accountable to the global community, Jamie announced. "With the support of governments, tech companies, and civil society, we are taking the first step toward a future where AI works for everyone." As cameras flashed and reporters asked questions, Jamie felt a surge of pride. It had taken years of effort, countless meetings, and overcoming seemingly insurmountable obstacles, but the AIAC was finally a reality. The future of AI was no longer uncertain. It was now a shared responsibility. The world watched with bated breath as the AI Accountability Council, AIAC, began its operations. The announcement of its formation had been met with optimism, but the real challenge was about to unfold. With the global tech giants on board and governments now committed to upholding the new AI guidelines, it was time for the AIAC to prove itself. The first test of the Council's authority and its commitment to transparency came sooner than anyone had expected. It started with a malfunction. At first, it seemed like a routine software glitch in a new AI system developed by one of the largest tech companies in the world. The AI system, designed to optimize logistics and supply chains, was meant to cut costs and improve efficiency across global markets. But a small bug in the system caused it to miscalculate shipping routes, leading to massive delays and the loss of billions of dollars in goods. What started as a minor issue soon spiraled into a full-blown crisis. Within a matter of days, the AI system began making catastrophic decisions. Shipments of vital medical supplies were rerouted to the wrong countries, agricultural products were left to spoil due to logistics failures, and countless businesses were affected by the disruption. The damage wasn't just financial, it was human. Hospitals in underdeveloped countries were left without life-saving medications. Emergency relief efforts were delayed due to the mismanagement of vital resources. As the news spread, panic began to ripple across international markets. As the situation escalated, the AIAC was thrust into the spotlight. Jamie and his team were immediately called into action. The world was watching, and all eyes were on the newly formed council to see how it would handle the crisis. The AIAC's ability to manage this situation would determine its credibility, not just as a regulatory body, but as a global authority on AI ethics and safety. Jamie called an emergency meeting with the council's leadership team, which consisted of representatives from governments, tech companies, academia, and civil society. The stakes couldn't have been higher. If the AIAC handled the crisis poorly, it would send a message that the new regulatory body wasn't capable of handling the immense challenges posed by AI. "We need to act fast," Jamie said, pacing in front of the council. "This is a global issue. The damage is already being done. We need to address the malfunction, but we also need to hold the company accountable. We cannot let this be swept under the rug." The team agreed. The first priority was to halt the AI system immediately and prevent further damage. The second priority was to investigate the cause of the malfunction, determine whether the company had violated any of the AI guidelines, and assess whether the AI's failure could have been anticipated and prevented. Jamie's first move was to issue a statement calling for the immediate suspension of the AI system in question. The AIAC would conduct a full investigation into the malfunction, and the company responsible would be required to provide full transparency regarding the failure. There would be no hiding behind corporate jargon or vague explanations. This was a matter of public trust. The AIAC's investigative team, consisting of top AI experts, engineers, and ethicists, was quickly assembled. Jamie personally oversaw the investigation, which was conducted with unprecedented transparency. Every step was documented, and the public was kept informed through regular updates on the AIAC website and social media channels. As the investigation unfolded, it became clear that the failure wasn't just a simple bug. The AI system had been trained on incomplete data and had been optimized purely for profit, with little regard for the potential social consequences. The company had cut corners to accelerate the system's deployment, failing to adhere to the guidelines of transparency, fairness, and accountability. "It's worse than we thought," Jamie said, reviewing the initial findings with his team. "This wasn't just a glitch. This was systemic negligence. The AI was designed to prioritize cost-cutting above all else, with no regard for the broader societal impact." The AIAC's findings were damning. The company had violated several key principles of the AI guidelines, including fairness, transparency, and accountability. The AIAC released a public report detailing the failures, and the media coverage exploded. Headlines read, "AI Gone Wrong. Global Tech Giant's AI System Causes Chaos, and AI Accountability Council Exposes Negligence in AI Development." The company responsible for the malfunction, once one of the most influential tech giants in the world, now found itself at the center of a storm. Public outrage was swift and unforgiving. Thousands of people around the world took to social media to demand accountability. Activists rallied in the streets, calling for stronger regulations and greater oversight. The company, under intense pressure, issued a statement expressing regret for the incident. They claimed that the failure was an isolated incident and promised to implement corrective measures. However, the AIAC was not satisfied with the company's response. The AIAC insisted on a thorough review of all AI systems the company had deployed and demanded that the company commit to a long-term plan to ensure their systems adhered to the AI guidelines. But the public wasn't buying it. The AIAC's investigation had shown that the company's negligence wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of a broader pattern of pushing AI systems to market without sufficient testing, transparency, or safeguards. Jamie, in a televised address, made it clear that the company's response was insufficient. "This is not just about one malfunction. This is about the future of AI. This company, like so many others, prioritized speed and profit over ethical responsibility. And that ends now." The company's stock price took a massive hit. Governments around the world began to look at the AIAC's findings seriously, with some considering additional regulatory measures to ensure that AI systems were deployed more responsibly in the future. The crisis marked a turning point. It wasn't just about fixing one malfunction. It was about proving that the AIAC could hold powerful companies accountable for their actions. The failure of the AI system became a global wake-up call. People realized that AI wasn't just a tool to make life easier. It was a tool that could have real, life-altering consequences. And with that realization came a new sense of urgency around AI governance. For Jamie, the aftermath was bittersweet. On one hand, the AIAC had proven that it could take swift action and demand accountability. The transparency of the investigation had earned the council respect and credibility. On the other hand, the incident was a stark reminder of the dangers of unchecked AI development. The council wasn't done yet. In the wake of the crisis, Jamie called for stronger measures, tighter regulations, more comprehensive audits, and stricter penalties for companies that violated the AI guidelines. He knew that this was only the beginning of a much larger struggle. As Jamie looked out over the city from his office window, he reflected on the past few months. The AIAC had come a long way, but there was still so much work to do. The battle for ethical AI development was far from over. There would be more crises, more challenges, and more obstacles to overcome. But Jamie was ready. The AI revolution was here to stay, and it was up to him and the AIAC to ensure that it served humanity, not the other way around. The AI Accountability Council, AIAC, had just passed its first true test, but the aftermath of the global crisis left an unpredictable trail of fallout. While Jamie's swift and transparent actions had earned the council credibility, the public's view on AI regulation was now divided. The crisis had demonstrated the profound potential consequences of unchecked AI, but it had also triggered a wave of resistance from tech companies, civil liberties advocates, and even a segment of the general public that feared the growing influence of the AIAC itself. In the wake of the AI failure, the media attention was relentless. For many, the AIAC was now seen as the hero, exposing negligence and enforcing accountability in a world where powerful companies had become too accustomed to operating without oversight. But for others, the council represented an overreach, an unaccountable entity wielding too much power. What had started as a small but important initiative to ensure AI development was ethical had now escalated into a global conversation about the very nature of governance in the age of technology. AI accountability or AI overreach, read one headline from a prominent news outlet. It was a sentiment shared by many who were afraid that the AIAC might stifle innovation, slow down technological progress, or impose burdensome restrictions on companies working to develop life-saving technologies. In a heated interview with a popular talk show host, a leading tech analyst voiced her concerns. "We need regulation, yes, but not this. What Jamie and the AIAC are proposing could halt AI research altogether. It's bureaucratic red tape, and it's dangerous. The AI revolution is here, and we can't afford to let fear dictate its future." But Jamie understood the tension. He had seen how the public's views could shift from one crisis to the next. The conversation surrounding AI was a delicate balance. On one side, there was an urgent need for regulation. On the other, there was the constant pressure to innovate, to develop, and to advance. And if that balance wasn't maintained, the future of AI itself could be jeopardized. Jamie's next move was clear. It was time to rebuild the narrative. If the AIAC was to survive in the long run, it needed to convince the public that it wasn't a force to be feared, but a necessary body to ensure AI could be developed responsibly. The key to that success lay in communication, something that Jamie knew would be difficult given the fierce opposition coming from both tech industry leaders and privacy advocates. The AIAC launched a global initiative to engage the public more directly. They organized town halls, webinars, and open forums across the world, with the goal of explaining the council's mission and vision and answering people's questions about the risks and benefits of AI regulation. In addition, Jamie pushed for more transparency around the council's decision-making processes, making sure every action the AIAC took was documented and publicly accessible. At one of the town halls in Berlin, Jamie spoke before a packed auditorium of concerned citizens, activists, and journalists. It was his chance to speak directly to the people who were most worried about the AIAC's influence on their lives. "We know that the rise of AI has raised questions about privacy, ethics, and the future of work," Jamie began, addressing the crowd. "The AIAC is not here to destroy the future. We are here to safeguard it. We believe that AI has the potential to revolutionize our world, but it must be done responsibly. We can't let greed, negligence, or even good intentions without foresight shape this technology. We need to ensure that it benefits everyone, not just the powerful." His words resonated with many in the audience, but not everyone was convinced. A protester from a civil liberties group interrupted, challenging Jamie's argument. "How can we trust an unelected council with so much power over the future of our technology? What's stopping you from becoming the very thing you're fighting against? Bureaucracy, control, and censorship?" Jamie didn't flinch. "We're not here to control innovation," he responded, his voice calm but firm. "We're here to ensure that the AI revolution doesn't come at the expense of human dignity or freedom. The AIAC is not above the people. We're accountable to the public, and every step we take will be transparent and open for scrutiny." While the debate raged on, there was a noticeable shift in how people viewed the council. The AIAC wasn't perfect, and Jamie knew it. But as the council opened up, its commitment to transparency won over many of the skeptical voices. Still, there were loud detractors who argued that the AIAC's involvement in the tech industry could create an unhealthy level of influence. The question remained, could the council truly act as a neutral entity, Or would it eventually become entangled in the same political and corporate power struggles it had initially sought to prevent? As the AIC's influence grew, so did the pressure from powerful lobbying groups. Companies whose AI systems had been called into question during the crisis were now mobilizing to undermine the council. Jamie had expected some pushback, but what followed was more coordinated and more aggressive than he had anticipated. Large firms poured money into PR campaigns designed to paint the AIAC as a threat to innovation. A handful of influential policymakers, many of whom had close ties to the tech industry, began to question the legitimacy of the council. Some called for tighter restrictions on AIAC's powers, while others pushed for more oversight by national governments instead of a global body. In response, the AIAC launched a multi-pronged strategy to counteract the growing influence of corporate lobbyists. One of the most important actions they took was to bolster public support, reaching out to grassroots organizations, universities, and tech entrepreneurs who believed in ethical AI development. One key ally in this effort was Dr. Emily Nguyen, a prominent ethicist who had been working closely with Jamie from the beginning. Emily's research on the social impact of AI had earned her international recognition, and her voice had become a crucial part of the AIC's campaign. Jamie, Emily said during one of their strategy meetings, "We need to appeal directly to those who will be most affected by AI, the general public. They need to see that this isn't just a corporate fight. It's about protecting the very foundation of society. We can't afford to let these companies pull the wool over our eyes." Emily's suggestion sparked the idea for the AIC to partner with advocacy groups and independent journalists who had long been critical of the tech industry. Together, they launched an initiative called AI for People, which aimed to raise awareness about the benefits of AI accountability. The initiative quickly gained traction, with millions of people signing petitions, attending rallies, and speaking out in favor of ethical AI. As the AIC became increasingly embroiled in the political and corporate battles surrounding AI, Jamie faced his toughest challenge yet, holding the council together amid growing division. The tech industry and political elites continued to press for changes that would weaken the council's authority, while many of his allies warned that they couldn't afford to compromise on the council's mission. There were days when Jamie doubted his ability to keep the council united. Behind the scenes, arguments erupted over policy decisions, and the pressure from corporate lobbyists became overwhelming. But Jamie knew that he couldn't back down. Not now. Not when so much was at stake. "The world is watching us," he said to his team one evening, his voice filled with determination. "We're not just here to regulate AI. We're here to make sure that AI serves humanity. If we fail, it won't just be a setback for us. It'll be a setback for every person who believes in a future where technology benefits everyone. We've come too far to turn back now." With renewed resolve, Jamie doubled down on his efforts to push for global AI regulation. He knew that the road ahead would be tough, but he was ready. The AI revolution was still in its early stages, and the battle for its future had only just begun. The global tension around AI regulation had reached a boiling point. While the AI Accountability Council, AIAC, was gaining recognition for its transparency and unwavering commitment to ethical standards, it was also under attack from multiple sides. Public faith in the council had grown stronger, but so had the organized opposition. For every person who saw the council as a beacon of hope, there were two others who viewed it as a bureaucratic nightmare, an entity too powerful to be allowed unchecked influence. As the pressure mounted, Jamie found himself at the center of a storm that was growing ever more dangerous. The challenges were no longer just about corporate resistance or political pushback. The real threat had become a crisis of trust. It started with a series of leaks. Someone inside the AIAC had begun feeding information to the press, documents that showed internal debates over the council's policies, the compromises it had made under pressure, and, most troubling of all, concerns about the growing influence of corporations on the council's decision-making process. The leaks were devastating, and the damage to the AIAC's credibility was immediate. Despite Jamie's transparency efforts, the public began to question the council's ability to remain impartial. The leaks painted a picture of an organization at odds with itself, where high-level discussions were full of contradictions and a growing sense of confusion. People began to ask, if the AIAC couldn't even keep its own house in order, how could it be trusted to regulate AI on a global scale? As soon as the leaks hit the headlines, the media storm began. Critics of the AIAC pounced on the opportunity to call the council's legitimacy into question. Social media buzzed with hashtags like hashtag AIACfail and hashtag no more regulations, and the news outlets seized on the controversy, framing the debate as a failure of oversight rather than a growing pains issue. Jamie's phone rang off the hook with interview requests from journalists eager to get his take on the scandal. He couldn't escape it. No matter where he went, the narrative seemed to follow him like a shadow. The damage was done. The leaks had opened a chasm of distrust, and now it seemed as if the entire structure of the AIAC was in jeopardy. "Jamie, you need to make a statement," Emily said urgently during a meeting with the council's leadership. The tension in the room was palpable. Emily, who had been Jamie's closest ally throughout the AIAC's journey, was visibly shaken. "We're losing the public. This could be the end of everything we've worked for." Jamie ran his hand through his hair, exhausted and overwhelmed. He had known there would be resistance, but the leaks had cut deep. It was as if all the goodwill the AIAC had built up over the years was suddenly being wiped away in a matter of days. "I know," Jamie replied, his voice thick with concern, "but we can't just throw in the towel. If we back down now, everything will have been for nothing." They needed to act fast. The AIAC couldn't afford to let this scandal define its legacy. But what Jamie didn't anticipate was just how personal the situation would become. As Jamie dug deeper into the source of the leaks, he uncovered a shocking revelation. The person responsible for the leaks was someone Jamie had trusted, a senior staff member named Grace Mitchell, who had been one of the original architects of the AIAC's ethical guidelines. Grace was brilliant, dedicated, and outspoken on the need for strong AI oversight, but there were cracks in her loyalty that Jamie hadn't seen coming. During the investigation, it became clear that Grace had become disillusioned with the AIAC's growing ties to powerful tech companies. She felt that the council had been co-opted, that its mission had been diluted in the face of immense corporate pressure. She believed the AIAC was no longer operating with the same purity of purpose it had when it was first conceived. In a heartbreaking confrontation, Jamie met with Grace in a private office. The room was silent, the weight of their shared history hanging heavy in the air. Grace was calm, but there was a coldness in her eyes that Jamie had never seen before. "You knew what you were doing," Jamie said, trying to keep his emotions in check. "You knew what would happen if these leaks got out. Why didn't you come to me first? Why sabotage everything we've built?" Grace met his gaze, her voice unwavering. "You were too blinded by your vision of the AIAC as a beacon of hope," she replied. "I watched as you got pulled into the same game that everyone else was playing. The council was supposed to be above that, but now it's just another cog in the machine. I couldn't stand by and let that happen." Jamie's heart sank. He had never imagined that someone so integral to the council's mission would betray it in such a way. But now, he realized the truth. Grace wasn't just an insider. She was a whistleblower, exposing the cracks in the foundation of the AIAC. With Grace's betrayal hanging over him, Jamie knew that the AIAC had to rebuild its trust with the public, and fast. But the question was, how? The first step was clear: complete transparency. Jamie decided to hold a global press conference where he would lay everything out on the table. No more secrets. No more evasions. He would address the leaks head-on, explain the council's internal struggles, and reiterate the AIAC's core mission. At the press conference, Jamie stood before the world's media, looking out at a sea of cameras and reporters. His usual calm demeanor was now tinged with the weight of responsibility. He began by acknowledging the council's flaws, admitting that the leaks had revealed deep divisions and that the council's own internal processes had failed at times. "I will not pretend that the AIAC is perfect," Jamie began, his voice steady but resolute. "We've made mistakes. We've allowed ourselves to become entangled in the very system we sought to change. But I want to be clear about one thing. Our mission has never wavered. We are here to ensure that AI serves humanity, not the other way around. We are here to hold those who wield it accountable. And I will not let corporate interests or political pressure undermine that mission." The media was silent for a moment. The truth had been laid bare, but Jamie's willingness to confront the crisis head-on resonated with many. He continued, pledging to implement sweeping reforms within the AIAC to address its internal issues and reassert its commitment to transparency and independence. We will be implementing stronger oversight of our own operations. We will ensure that the voices of independent experts and civil society remain at the heart of our decision-making. The AIAC is not beholden to corporations, and it will never be. The response was mixed. Some applauded his candor and the steps toward reform, while others remained skeptical. But one thing was clear. Jamie had done what was necessary to take back control of the narrative. The crisis wasn't over, but the AIAC's credibility was starting to recover. Though Jamie's statement had won some back, the battle was far from over. The AIAC now had to prove its commitment to reform, not just through words, but through actions. As the council implemented the promised changes, revamping internal processes, increasing external audits, and promoting more public dialogue, Jamie kept his focus on the long-term vision. A world where AI wasn't feared but understood, a world where its potential was harnessed for good, and a world where accountability was at the center of its growth. But as he knew all too well, the road ahead would be fraught with challenges. The battle for ethical AI wasn't just a fight against corporations or political forces, it was a fight for trust. And trust, once lost, was not easily regained. The fallout from the leaks had shaken the foundation of the AI Accountability Council, AIAC, but Jamie knew it wasn't enough to simply weather the storm. The public had been skeptical before, and now their trust had been fractured. The road ahead would be harder than he'd ever imagined. But Jamie wasn't the kind of person to back down. The world was watching, and this was his chance to show the AIAC could survive the fire and come out stronger on the other side. In the weeks following the press conference, Jamie set to work on one thing: rebuilding the AIAC's credibility. But this time, he knew they couldn't afford to make the same mistakes again. The AIAC had to evolve, not just as a body of regulation, but as an organization that was truly accountable, not only to governments or corporations, but to the people whose lives were affected by AI every day. To start the process of rebuilding, Jamie convened an emergency meeting with the core members of the council. It was time to make some tough decisions. "We need to overhaul everything," Jamie began, his voice steady but filled with resolve. "We've been reactive, not proactive. Our internal processes were too slow, too bureaucratic, and too vulnerable to external pressure. That changes today." There was an uneasy silence in the room as Jamie's words hung in the air. Everyone had seen the leaks, and everyone understood what was at stake. But now, the council's future depended on what they did next. "We need an independent body to audit our operations regularly, someone who isn't beholden to any of us," Jamie continued. "We need to diversify our board, to include more voices from civil society, academia, and marginalized communities. And we need a new approach to transparency, no more closed-door discussions. Our decisions need to be public, and our actions need to be measurable." One by one, the members nodded. Emily, who had been a staunch ally through the worst of the leaks, spoke up. "Jamie's right," she said, her voice firm. "We need to prove to the world that we aren't just another corporate entity. We need to show them that we're committed to protecting people, not profits." There was a sense of urgency in the room. It was clear that if they didn't act swiftly, the AIAC could lose any hope of remaining a credible authority in the world of AI regulation. "Let's make it happen," Jamie said, his resolve hardening. "We will set a new standard for AI governance. The future depends on it." The first reform came in the form of an unprecedented decision. Jamie announced that the council would be implementing an open voting system for all major policy decisions. Each council member would have their votes recorded and made public, allowing the world to see who was pushing for what and why. This decision would hold the council accountable, ensuring that no single group or entity could pull the strings behind the scenes. At the same time, Jamie spearheaded the creation of an independent oversight board composed of leading AI ethicists, academics, and advocates for civil rights. This board would be tasked with ensuring the AIAC's decisions were transparent, unbiased, and consistent with its core values. It wasn't just about fixing the internal structure, it was about creating a system of checks and balances that would prevent corruption and undue influence from external parties. For the first time, the AIAC began hosting regular town halls and Q&A sessions with the public. Jamie personally took part in these events, answering tough questions from concerned citizens, tech industry leaders, and even former critics of the council. He made sure every question was addressed, no matter how uncomfortable. "We're not here to protect ourselves," Jamie said during one such town hall. "We're here to protect the future. AI is a tool, not a force of nature. We're the ones responsible for how it's used. And that's a responsibility we take seriously." The town halls had mixed results, but they did something important. They allowed Jamie to show the world that the AIAC was committed to reform. With every public statement, every interaction, he was slowly but surely winning back some of the trust that had been lost. But there was still a long road ahead. As the AIAC began to implement its reforms, the corporate pushback only intensified. The tech giants who had once been hesitant to speak out against the council were now mobilizing their vast resources to undermine its influence. They lobbied fiercely, working with lawmakers and influential media outlets to paint the AIAC as an enemy of progress. One of the most vocal opponents was Nathaniel Gray, the CEO of Syntec, a global AI corporation that had previously been investigated by the council for questionable ethical practices. Gray had been silent during the initial months of the AIAC's formation, but now, with the pressure on, he came out swinging. "AI is the future of humanity," Gray said in a viral interview. "We can't let a council of unelected bureaucrats dictate how technology should evolve. Innovation thrives in an environment of freedom, not regulation. The AIAC is standing in the way of progress. And frankly, it's dangerous." The words hit hard. Gray was a charismatic figure, and his influence in the tech world was immense. Many smaller companies and independent developers began to rally behind him, arguing that the AIAC's reforms would choke innovation and slow down AI development in a world that could not afford to wait. But Jamie knew this battle was inevitable. The AIAC's reforms would always face resistance from those who stood to lose the most from regulation. Still, Jamie remained undeterred. "This is a fight for the future of our society," Jamie said in response to Gray's comments. "We cannot allow companies to operate without oversight. If we don't act now, we risk creating an AI-driven world where only a few people control our destinies." The battle was now clearly drawn. Those who believed AI needed to be accountable, and those who believed it was too big to be governed. As the debate raged on, Jamie recognized that to truly solidify the AIAC's place as a global leader in AI governance, it would need the backing of key international stakeholders. He reached out to governments around the world, pushing for an international treaty on AI ethics, an agreement that would set a global standard for the responsible use of AI. For the first time, several countries, including the European Union and Canada, expressed support for the AIAC's efforts. In a landmark move, they agreed to sign a treaty that would establish common standards for AI development, including transparency, fairness, and the protection of human rights. While the treaty was far from perfect, it was a start, an acknowledgement that the world was ready to move beyond the chaos of unchecked AI innovation. Jamie's leadership, alongside the growing global support for ethical AI, began to shift the narrative. The AIAC was no longer just an organization under fire. It was becoming a key player in the global conversation on the future of AI. As Jamie looked out across the world stage, he realized that the work of the AIAC was only just beginning. The road to ethical AI governance was long and fraught with challenges, but the Council had taken the first major steps toward a new future. The reforms, the transparency, and the public accountability were all part of a larger vision. A vision where AI could be used to uplift society, not tear it apart. Where technology could be harnessed for the benefit of all, not just the powerful few. But Jamie knew that the AIAC would need to stay vigilant. The road to ethical AI wasn't just about passing laws and making policies. It was about maintaining the courage to stand firm, even when the world seemed to be against you. As the AIAC began its work anew, Jamie couldn't help but feel a renewed sense of purpose. The road ahead would be hard, but for the first time in a long while, he felt hopeful about the future of AI. As the AI Accountability Council, AIAC, made waves with its new reforms, the world began to take notice. No longer confined to the realm of regulatory bodies and tech policy debates, the AIAC's influence began to spread across borders. Jamie's strategic decision to pursue an international AI ethics treaty was paying off, but the journey was far from easy. As the Council's standing grew, so too did the forces that sought to undermine it. With global momentum building, Jamie found himself in the midst of negotiations with a host of international players. If the AIAC was to truly succeed, It would need the cooperation of governments, tech companies, civil rights groups, and even ordinary citizens. But trust was fragile, and every misstep could lead to disaster. The stakes had never been higher. The idea of a global AI ethics treaty was revolutionary. The world had never come together on a single piece of technology regulation of this scale. But achieving global consensus was a Herculean task. Jamie was thrust into a whirlwind of diplomatic meetings, video calls, and high-stakes negotiations, all while trying to maintain the Council's integrity and vision. One of the first major hurdles was dealing with the divergent interests of the world's leading powers. The United States, China, and the European Union all had different priorities when it came to AI regulation. The US wanted to preserve its competitive edge, while China sought to maintain control over its domestic AI landscape. The European Union, on the other hand, was primarily concerned with privacy and data protection. Jamie spent hours on video calls with diplomats and government officials, often navigating tense conversations and opposing viewpoints. Every meeting seemed to bring new challenges, new questions, and new concerns. "Jamie," said Clara Roth, a diplomat from the European Union who had become a key ally in the AIC's mission, "the European Union can only support this treaty if we have firm guarantees on data privacy and individual rights. We cannot afford to let AI be used as a tool of mass surveillance or discrimination." Jamie nodded thoughtfully. "I agree, Clara. Our goal is to ensure AI serves humanity, not the other way around. The AIC is committed to ensuring that ethical standards are met across all borders, including privacy." But then, a voice from the other side of the table spoke up, a Chinese official, Mr. Xiao, who had been silent until now. "Jamie, the issue with privacy is one thing, but we also need to ensure that AI development is not stifled by overly restrictive policies. China's approach has been one of strategic control. If the West insists on enforcing standards that could impede our technological progress, we will have no choice but to withdraw from the treaty," he said, his tone cold and diplomatic, but tinged with an unmistakable threat. Jamie understood the implications. A failure to reach a consensus could undermine everything the AIAC had worked for. He needed to find common ground, and fast. "Mr. Xiao," Jamie replied calmly, "the AIAC is not about stifling development, but about ensuring that AI benefits everyone, not just a select few. We're not talking about restricting innovation. We're talking about making sure that the innovation is ethical, inclusive, and fair." The meeting continued, with tensions simmering beneath the surface. Jamie could feel the weight of the moment. The entire future of AI governance depended on what happened here. It was a delicate balancing act, and every word, every gesture mattered. Days later, after what seemed like endless hours of negotiation, the first draft of the Global AI Ethics Treaty was ready. But as Jamie and Clara reviewed the document, they realized that the treaty, as it stood, was far from ideal. "There's a clause here that allows for the development of AI without full transparency in certain high-priority regions," Clara noted, her finger running over the text. "If this clause stays in, it could give countries like China an escape route to bypass ethical scrutiny." Jamie read the clause again, his heart sinking. If they allowed this clause to stand, it would be a major blow to the integrity of the treaty. It would create a loophole that could undermine the entire purpose of the agreement. "We can't let that slide," Jamie said, his voice firm. "This treaty is about transparency, not secrecy. We'll have to take this back to the negotiating table." But as Jamie prepared to address the issue, he learned something that shook him to his core. Nathaniel Gray, the CEO of Syntec, had been lobbying behind the scenes to influence the treaty's terms. Gray had been using his vast network of industry connections and political leverage to push for clauses that would benefit his company and other tech giants, at the expense of ethics and fairness. It wasn't just the governments that Jamie had to contend with. The corporate giants were just as powerful in shaping the future of AI. And Gray, with his charm and political savvy, was a formidable opponent. The AIC's position was now more precarious than ever. The treaty was on the brink of collapse, and the pressures from both global governments and tech corporations were mounting. Jamie could feel the weight of the responsibility bearing down on him. If the treaty failed, the AIC would be viewed as ineffective, a paper tiger in the face of corporate power and geopolitical tension. But there was one person who could tip the scales: Elon Musk. While Musk had stayed mostly silent in the global discussions about AI governance, Jamie knew that his influence could be a game changer. Musk had built some of the most advanced AI technologies in the world, and his voice carried immense weight. Jamie had to make a decision. Would he continue down the path of diplomacy, hoping to get a resolution with the current players? Or would he take a risk and reach out to Musk, hoping that his involvement could provide the leverage needed to break the deadlock? After a long night of deliberation, Jamie made the call. "Mr. Musk," Jamie said when Elon answered the phone, "I need your help." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Finally, Musk's voice came through, tinged with curiosity. "What's the issue?" "We're about to lose the AI ethics treaty," Jamie explained. "The big tech companies are pulling strings, trying to reshape the document in their favor. We need someone with influence to help us get this back on track. You're one of the only people who can make a real difference." Musk didn't hesitate. "I'm in. Let's fix this." Within hours, Elon Musk joined the discussions, and his involvement was nothing short of electrifying. His reputation as a visionary in AI, space exploration, and cutting-edge technology gave him an undeniable authority. His appearance at the negotiation table shifted the dynamics. Musk made it clear that he was not there to protect the interests of the tech giants. He was there to ensure that AI development would be responsible and ethical. "Elon, we need a clear commitment from the tech companies," Jamie said in a follow-up meeting with Musk and the corporate lobbyists. "There can be no more loopholes. This treaty has to be for everyone." Musk leaned in, his voice cutting through the room. "I'm tired of hearing about corporate interests," he said bluntly. "We need a future where AI works for everyone, not just the billionaires. This treaty should be about building a better world for all of humanity. I'm willing to put my name on that, and I'm betting you all are too, or this deal isn't worth anything." The room fell silent, but Musk's words were a turning point. With his help, Jamie was able to push through the final version of the treaty, one that addressed the concerns of data privacy, AI transparency, and the need for global cooperation. With the treaty signed by all parties, the AIAC had achieved what had once seemed impossible: a unified, global agreement on AI governance. It wasn't perfect, but it was a monumental step forward. Jamie knew that this was just the beginning of a long journey, but for the first time in a while, he felt a sense of relief. The AIAC had faced down both political and corporate pressure, and it had emerged victorious. But the future of AI was still uncertain. The world would be watching closely, and the real test of the AIAC's success would be in its ability to enforce the treaty's terms and hold AI developers accountable. Jamie wasn't naive enough to believe that the work was over, but as he looked out over the horizon, he knew one thing for certain. The AIAC was no longer just a council. It was a movement, and the world was ready for change. The treaty had been signed, but Jamie knew that the real work was only beginning. The AI Accountability Council, AIAC, had faced down immense opposition, from world governments to the tech giants, and had emerged victorious in securing a landmark agreement on global AI ethics. But the question remained: would the treaty be upheld? As global leaders, tech moguls, and regulators gathered to celebrate the signing of the treaty, Jamie felt a sense of quiet unease. The ink on the document was barely dry, and already there were whispers of ways to subvert its provisions. In some ways, the treaty's success was only the first battle in a much larger war for the future of AI. For the treaty to succeed, it would need to be implemented on a global scale. Every country, every corporation, and every individual involved in AI development would need to comply with the provisions set forth. But that wasn't a simple task. The AIAC would be responsible for enforcing these rules, but the AI industry was massive, decentralized, and incredibly powerful. "Jamie," Emily said, breaking through his thoughts, "we've done the hard part. The treaty is signed. But now we need to ensure everyone follows through. We need a global framework for enforcement, and that's going to be even harder than the negotiations themselves." Jamie nodded. "I know, but the AIAC can't back down now. We've made promises, and we need to keep them." The next step was clear. The AIAC needed to set up the infrastructure to ensure the treaty's enforcement. This meant developing a system that could monitor AI development globally, flag violations, and take action when necessary. But even more difficult would be ensuring that every country and every tech company adhered to the new rules, especially when some of the largest players were already looking for loopholes. As the months passed, the pressure on the AIAC intensified. Some countries, particularly in the developing world, were resistant to the treaty's regulations. They argued that the provisions on data privacy and ethical AI development would stifle their technological progress. In private, some world leaders suggested that the treaty had been too influenced by Western ideals of fairness and transparency, making it difficult for other regions to implement. Meanwhile, the tech giants had already begun to test the waters. Syntech, led by Nathaniel Gray, began lobbying for exceptions to some of the treaty's key provisions. Gray, whose company had played a pivotal role in shaping AI technologies, was determined to find ways to evade some of the treaty's most stringent clauses, particularly those on transparency and AI development. Jamie and Emily had anticipated this. They knew that the real fight was not over the treaty itself, but over how it would be enforced. "We need to make it clear that non-compliance will have consequences," Jamie said during a private meeting with the AIAC's core leadership. "We cannot allow anyone, governments, companies, or individuals, to skirt the rules. This is the line in the sand." But with each new challenge, Jamie could feel the stakes rising. Every decision, every delay in enforcement, would have an impact not just on the future of the AIAC, but on the future of AI itself. Amid the growing challenges, Elon Musk surprised everyone with an unexpected move. After weeks of silence since the treaty's signing, he called Jamie with a proposition that would change the game. "Jamie, I've been thinking," Elon began, his voice unusually serious. "You're right. The treaty is just a start, but if we want to make sure it sticks, we need something bigger. I'm talking about a global AI oversight body, a permanent, independent entity with real authority to monitor compliance across the board." Jamie was taken aback. "You're saying we need a new organization? Something outside of the AIAC?" "Not outside, but part of it," Musk replied. "We need a body that can issue binding recommendations and enforce penalties when companies or governments violate the treaty. A global watchdog with teeth." Jamie paused, thinking through the implications. This was a massive undertaking, but Musk's offer, backed by his unparalleled influence in the tech world, could give the AIAC the authority and global presence it needed to ensure compliance. "You're talking about the kind of organization that could challenge even the most powerful governments and corporations," Jamie said slowly. "Exactly," Musk said, "and I'm willing to fund it. Let's make sure the AIAC has the power to back up its promises." Jamie wasn't sure whether to be thrilled or terrified by the idea. This was a bold, ambitious vision, one that could shape the future of AI for decades to come. But it would also place the AIAC under unprecedented scrutiny. It was a high-stakes gamble, one that could either solidify its place as a global authority or lead to its collapse if it failed to live up to the expectations. "Okay," Jamie said, "finally, let's do it. But we'll need the support of world governments, not just tech companies." Elon laughed. "Leave that to me." With Musk's offer on the table, the AIAC moved forward with plans to establish this new global oversight body. But as expected, the backlash was swift. Nathaniel Gray, whose company would be directly affected by the new organization's authority, launched an aggressive campaign to discredit the AIAC's decision. "The AIAC has no right to create its own enforcement body," Gray said in a public statement. "This is a clear power grab that will only slow down innovation and harm the very companies that are advancing humanity. We need freedom to develop AI without fear of a global regulatory body breathing down our necks." The tech world buzzed with criticism, but Elon's influence was undeniable. As the founder of multiple groundbreaking companies, Musk's endorsement of the oversight body provided a shield for the AIAC, one that was harder to ignore. Still, the real battle would take place in the halls of power. Jamie knew that to make this new body a reality, he would have to convince world leaders to give the AIAC and Musk full backing. The coming weeks would be pivotal in determining whether the global AI oversight body could become a reality. The AIAC's new global oversight body was put to the test in an unprecedented summit of world leaders and tech executives. It was an intense, high-stakes moment, one that would determine the fate of AI regulation for generations to come. As the summit began, Jamie stood before an assembly of government representatives, CEOs, and civil society leaders. He felt the weight of the moment pressing on him. This wasn't just about a treaty or a body of rules. This was about ensuring that AI would be developed ethically, responsibly, and in a way that benefited all of humanity, not just a select few. Elon and I are here today to offer a solution, Jamie began. A solution that doesn't just create another regulatory body, but a truly independent organization that will hold AI developers accountable. A global body that will ensure compliance with the AI Ethics Treaty. He paused, allowing his words to sink in. The room was filled with uncertainty, but also a sense of possibility. This body will not just be about monitoring compliance. It will also be about ensuring that AI development serves humanity's best interests. No more unchecked innovation, no more runaway AI. This is about building a future where technology and ethics go hand in hand. The tension in the room was palpable. Governments were divided. Tech executives were divided. But as Jamie spoke, there was a glimmer of hope that perhaps, just perhaps, the world was ready to come together to safeguard the future of AI. The vote was held in a historic, nail-biting session that would decide whether the global AI oversight body would be formed. With Elon Musk's backing and the full weight of the AIC's commitment to transparency and accountability, the proposal passed with a slim but decisive majority. The world had just made a bold choice. A global, independent body would be created to oversee the implementation of the AI Ethics Treaty, with the power to enforce penalties and issue recommendations to governments and companies alike. Jamie and Emily stood together in the aftermath of the vote. The AIAC had achieved something unprecedented, but they both knew that this was just the beginning. The true test would be in the months and years ahead, as the new oversight body began its work of holding the world's AI developers accountable. "Are we ready for this?" Emily asked quietly. Jamie smiled, the weight of the moment sinking in. "We have no choice. The future of AI is in our hands." Months had passed since the historic vote that saw the creation of the Global AI Oversight Body. The world was watching, waiting for signs that the AI Accountability Council, AIAC, could deliver on its promises. Jamie and his team had worked tirelessly, setting up the framework for the new organization, enacting stringent monitoring systems, and assembling a diverse group of experts to sit on the oversight body's advisory board. But even as they crossed milestone after milestone, a nagging sense of unease lingered. The new body, with its sweeping authority, was meant to ensure that AI would evolve in a way that was beneficial to humanity, not just to those with the power to shape it. But it was an unprecedented experiment. Could a single global organization hold the AI industry in check, or would it be crushed under the weight of corporate power and political maneuvering? Would the dream of ethical AI governance become a reality, or would the forces that had once resisted the AIC's efforts come roaring back? The first few months of the global AI oversight body's operations were a whirlwind of activity. Jamie had assembled a crack team, many of whom had worked with him through the treaty negotiations, but now they had to face an even more complex task, ensuring that every AI innovation, from self-driving cars to AI-driven medical systems, adhered to the ethical guidelines set forth by the treaty. Jamie's role had shifted. He was no longer just a negotiator or diplomat. Now, he was the face of the movement, a symbol of the fight for ethical AI. As the chair of the oversight body, he was responsible for overseeing investigations into companies and governments that violated the treaty's provisions. He knew that the stakes couldn't be higher. If this new body failed, the AI revolution could spiral out of control with disastrous consequences. "We've got our work cut out for us," Emily said one morning as they sat in their high-rise office, looking out over the city. "The oversight body is in place, but now the real challenge is making sure it has teeth. We're going to face pushback from every corner." Jamie leaned back in his chair, staring out the window at the sprawling city below. The skyline had always symbolized possibility, progress. But now, as AI became an even larger part of the global landscape, it also represented the risks of unchecked power. "I know. The world is watching us. If we don't succeed, it's not just the AIAC that fails. It's the future of AI itself." The first major test for the new oversight body came sooner than expected. A major scandal erupted involving Syntech, Nathaniel Gray's tech giant. The company's most recent AI algorithm, developed for a new line of advanced surveillance systems, was found to be in clear violation of the privacy provisions in the AI treaty. The algorithm had been harvesting vast amounts of personal data from unsuspecting citizens worldwide, without their knowledge or consent. Jamie's heart sank when he read the reports. Syntech had been one of the biggest advocates for the AI treaty, but now it was facing accusations of violating the very principles it had helped shape. The AIAC had to act quickly, and Jamie knew this would be their toughest challenge yet. If the oversight body didn't hold Syntech accountable, the entire treaty's credibility would be on the line. Nathaniel Gray is going to fight this every step of the way, Emily said, her voice tense. He's not going to take this lying down. Neither are we, Jamie said, his voice firm. The AIC can't back down. If we do, it will show the world that the treaty is just a paper tiger. The controversy over Syntech's actions quickly became global news. The public was outraged by the revelations. Privacy advocates, human rights groups, and even some of Syntech's own employees were calling for accountability. But Syntech was a corporate powerhouse, and Gray was a master of media manipulation. He had already started a counteroffensive, painting the AIAC as overreaching and intrusive. Gray's out there making it sound like we're trying to destroy innovation, Jamie said, pacing in his office late one night. He's framing this as a battle between progress and regulation. If we're not careful, he could turn public opinion against us. Emily nodded. The AIAC needs to be transparent in its actions. We can't afford to make this look like a witch hunt. If we don't act swiftly and decisively, Gray will turn the tide of public opinion in his favor. For Jamie, the battle was no longer just about enforcing a treaty. It was about showing the world that the AIAC was more than just a regulatory body. It was a symbol of the future of AI, a future where accountability and progress could coexist. A high-profile hearing was set. Jamie, alongside the oversight body, would confront Nathaniel Gray and Syntech's legal team in a public tribunal. It would be the most significant test of the AIAC's authority yet, and it would determine whether the AI revolution could continue with integrity. As the day of the hearing approached, Jamie couldn't help but feel a sense of foreboding. The room would be filled with the brightest minds in AI, technology, and law, but it would also be filled with adversaries who had the power to dismantle everything the AIAC had worked for. When the day finally arrived, Jamie walked into the grand courtroom, his heart pounding. The stakes couldn't have been higher. All eyes were on the AIAC. Would it rise to the occasion, or would it fall prey to corporate interests and political pressure? Elon Musk was sitting in the front row, his usual calm demeanor replaced with an intensity that mirrored Jamie's own. He was there to show his support, but also to ensure that the oversight body had the backing it needed. Musk knew, as Jamie did, that this moment would either define the future of AI or mark its downfall. The hearing began with the AIAC presenting its case. Emily, as the head of the investigative unit, laid out the evidence in meticulous detail, showing how Syntech's AI algorithm had violated both the spirit and letter of the treaty. Gray's legal team was formidable. They argued that Syntech's actions had been in line with innovative AI development and that the data collection had been standard practice in the industry. They also claimed that the AIAC had overstepped its bounds, infringing on Syntech's intellectual property rights. But Jamie wasn't intimidated. He took the stand to deliver a passionate defense of the AIAC's role in overseeing AI development. The AI Accountability Council is not just about enforcing rules. It's about protecting the values that should guide AI development: fairness, transparency, and respect for privacy, he said, his voice steady but forceful. We will not allow AI to be used as a tool of mass surveillance. The public deserves to know how their data is being used. And Syntech's actions were not just a violation of the treaty, they were a betrayal of public trust. The courtroom went silent as Jamie's words hung in the air. He knew that the battle wasn't over, but for the first time in a long time, he felt the full weight of his purpose. The AIC wasn't just an organization. It was a movement, a promise for a better, fairer future for AI. Hours passed, and the tension in the room was unbearable. Finally, the judge rendered a decision. Syntech was found in violation of the AI Ethics Treaty, and the oversight body was granted full authority to impose sanctions, including a heavy fine and a mandatory overhaul of Syntech's AI systems. It was a victory for the AIAC, but it was also a warning shot to the tech industry. No one, not even the giants, were above the law. The AIAC had proven that it could hold the most powerful companies accountable. As the hearing ended, Jamie exchanged a look with Emily. They had won the battle, but the war was far from over. The global AI oversight body was now firmly in place, but the real challenge would be maintaining its integrity and power in the face of constant pressure from governments and corporations. As Jamie left the courtroom, Elon approached him with a rare smile on his face. "You did it," Musk said. "We did it." Jamie nodded. "This is just the beginning. The AI revolution is still unfolding, but we've shown the world that accountability is possible." And with that, the AIAC had crossed its final horizon. The world was entering a new era of AI development, one where ethical oversight, transparency, and accountability were no longer optional but essential. But as Jamie looked out over the city that had always represented progress, he knew that this was just the start of an even greater challenge. The AI revolution had only just begun, and the true test of whether it could benefit humanity lay in the choices made in the years to come. What do you think about the verdict in the Syntech case? Was the AIAC right to impose such strict sanctions on the company, or did they go too far? How can we ensure that AI developers are held accountable without stifling innovation? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to follow Jamie's journey as he leads the charge for a responsible AI future.